Finance Committee and the Select Board to order on Thursday, January 25th, 2022. Do we have anything for open forum? So we are going to skip the introduction and the review of the budget issues. We've been through those a couple of times already. They are in the packet in case anybody either here or at home wants to understand what's kind of the overall, what's happening with the budget and what are the challenges. The one thing I will mention is that on Tuesday night, the Select Board did direct the budget makers in town to reduce the FY25 budget by $500,000. And we're going to add anything to that?
That's right. Of the two budgets, there's the Prop 2.5 budget, but then there's the what we've been calling the needs-based budget. In order to be able to get us on a track to land, and after all these contract increases, we want to make sure we're not entering later years like 27 and 28 with the fiscal deficit. So we want to start now and also set some targets for coming years that'll help us make sure we stay on the right side of the fiscal issues. And just an appreciation to the FinCom, because we're getting very specific now about what we're looking for in 26 and 27, what kind of efficiencies we want to sort of put dates against, what kinds of new revenue sources we want to put gains against. So all your comments are extremely helpful in helping us do that.
Great, thanks. So we've been starting off with sort of a little bit of a recap from the previous meeting amongst FinCom and what we kind of gleaned out of last week's budget hearing. So last week was the schools, and I don't know if anyone wants to start with any sort of high level ideas. Go right ahead, Heather.
What's the plan with the schools? Like, I think you used the phrase sharpen your pencil. I said tighten the budget. Are they, was that 500 coming from schools and town?
Exactly. So Kristen and Chris Chu and Valerie from the school committee will now sit down and take that direction and basically take a piece of it. And each of them, through the course of this process, will need to land with a new budget, which would be the override budget or the needs-based budget. We would, in our next meeting on the 13th, we want to see that near final budget that meets that target. So yes, both the schools and the town will need to go through their budgets and accumulate savings to the total $500,000.
What's the split? Were they assigned the split, or is that kind of up to them to?
It's something that that'll be worked out. I think we'll use something like the historical formula, but we have to kind of go through the healthcare and do the normal allocation process in reverse, so we don't have that exact allocation yet.
I think that one pending issue with the schools was the question about the contracts. We got a good answer on Unit A. We got a pretty good answer on the custodians. Unit E still remains a little bit vague. I think we'd like to get a little bit more on that, and there may be some other groups that we should probably get a little bit of a handle on, so we can have a pretty definitive explanation of what those raises involve.
Okay. So I thank you for all the efforts to make the budget more palatable to our town. My question is, how did we come up with the 500? Is this enough to put us on the right side of? We have both right sides, right? One is town voters, right, want to accept it, and town expenses wanted to make, right? So would that 500 put us on the right side for both equations, or how did we come up with that?
Good answer. So when we look at the budget task force stack up of the cost increases, that number is $13 million and change. The current thought is that we can't go to the taxpayer and ask them to cover that. We need to ask them for a smaller number and basically split the difference, ask for some help with the taxpayers to preserve services, but then do our own homework to try to save some money and make some of these responsible choices. So where did the 500,000 come from? So there probably is something on the order of $4.5 million that would not be covered even in an override scenario that we would have to find in the fiscal 25, 26, 27 budget. And we want to get started, but because we're right on 25, our opportunity to find and implement savings is less than I think it'll be in later years. So right now, we didn't vote on this as a select board. We talked about the 500,000 for 25, but as we look at 26 and 27, it'll be roughly $2 million that we'll need to pull out relative to the budget task force stack up of the new costs. So we have an eye on what the whole number needs to be to land in a fiscally balanced budget in 28. But we're starting with a smaller piece of it, mostly because we're right on top of it, and we know these cost increases are gonna land July 1st.
Any of the income members online have anything to add? I'm not seeing hands, but. No, okay. I know we did also have some follow-up questions that were outstanding for the schools, so they'll be back next week and we can, we'll be following up with some of that information. So let's dive into the FY 25 departmental budgets, and first up is the Board of Health. Thanks, Ray.
Sure, good evening.
You wanted to start with a very quick.
You got it.
What are the
Thank you so
changes, what are
much
the
for having
highlights?
me here tonight. So my name is Ray Dick, I'm the health director with the Westford Health Department. Tonight, the Board of Health is requesting an increase in personnel services, the town's public health nurses position. The position is a 30-hour position that's been supplemented with ARPA funds to a full-time status since FY 22. The ARPA funding will end this June of 24. We're proposing to utilize the clinical immunization and services revolving account to supplement this position's full-time status. Regarding changes to our budget with the Proposition 2.5 override, this budget shows a cancellation of the school's dental program for Westford students grades K through 5. This public health program is offered for over 20 years here. The program provides dental screenings, cleanings, and fluoride treatments for about 300 children. We increased the cleaning dental fee to $15 last year and to $20 for this year. The program does begin every year in January, February. It provides needed dental care for all elementary students in Westford due to oral health disparities, hygiene practices, folk remedies, and some cultural beliefs. Several cases occur in Westford where these students do not see a dentist until their baby teeth are infected or demonstrating tooth decay. Cultural barriers also show the need for dental care for children. Lastly, I'll say about the program, all kids receive healthy teeth education, a kids cavity-free coloring book, toothbrush, floss, toothpaste, and a referral list for any needed further treatment. Thank you so much for taking the time to consider our requests and our budgets this year, and happy to answer any questions you have.
Thanks.
Sure.
Any other questions?
I
Okay,
have questions.
go ahead, Heather.
I was just hoping somebody else would do it first. I'm trying to pull up the dental revolving fund. I saw that somewhere, and I was just curious with the increase in rates, can you not continue to support that?
So the
With-
program's the line item is about $3,900, and that line item pays for the hygienist fees, for hourly fees. It also pays for any equipment that's needed, the trays, the toothbrushes, things of that need to be all of the products have to be cleaned through an autoclave. Dr. Schofield's here in Westford volunteers those services. But the program's never actually covered its costs, so to speak. So we bring on about $1,300 last year. This year we hope to bring in about $1,800 in the program. It's always been $10 for the $20 years that I've been here. So last year was the first year it's been increased.
So is it not part of this BOH dental gift account?
So the dental gift account is it's a senior dental
Okay, so
program,
that's not.
and that we
okay,
fundraise for.
Okay. Can I keep going?
Okay, go ahead.
What does NAACHO stand for?
So NACHO is the National Association of County and City Health Boards. It's a national organization for public health.
You haven't received the revenues from the flu clinics yet, right? That's why they're not in these.
Correct. So as strange as it is, it takes between 7 and 9 months to get our revenue back, just due to the Massachusetts process with reimbursement from insurance companies.
Okay.
So we
the-
expect about another 30,000 in that account.
But that's fully expensed, all your expenses are in there then already.
Correct, we've already paid for all of our vaccines.
So did vaccines go down, is it just less demand? Cause
No, in the past, we've spent between $45,000 and $65,000 on flu vaccine. There are several types of flu vaccine. There's actually 4 different types. This year, we always order high dose, rate to 65 after. But we did also order some vaccines that were a little less expensive.
okay, it's only 30 this year.
Correct.
Okay.
So we try to be more efficient and look at our numbers and not overspend, not reimburse.
Are there plans to use up some of these balances, like especially in the gift accounts?
So the gift accounts pay for different projects. For instance, we just had a older adult fall prevention program where we provided ice melts, a snow brush, a resource card for some of our older adults that are 55 and older here in the community that have functional needs or disabilities. So those accounts pay for those. They pay for things like the little tchotchkes for health fairs, things like that that we give away. Some programs for our restaurants or thermometers to help them when they lose power.
So they're specific.
Yeah,
That you
we try to burn them down each year with different projects to help the community.
Okay.
That's it, or you can keep going.
Does anyone want to check?
I have a question.
Go
I wanna
ahead.
break it up.
We'll bring it up later. Go ahead, Tom.
So obviously, the children's dental program is, important and painful to cut. What other things were you considering as alternatives? I'm trying to ask this question the right way. I know that any cut would be tough, but were there other things you considered and said, you know what, those things are even more essential to the community health, so this is the one that we have to choose to cut?
Well, for myself, I have been researching to see if there are other ways that we can supplement this particular program.
Yeah.
Whether that's through fundraising or also, for instance, TOPS has a dental program in Boston. How can we refer people here in Westford? I've been looking at the Community Health Alliance to see if they would consider taking any Westford elementary students for their dental program. To try to find other ways that if this program is cut, that we could also offer a free service for folks that don't have dental insurance at least.
That's a really good, so I'm really glad you're doing that. If you had to, whatever the amount of money represented by this is, it's $3,900. What would the next candidate for cutting $3,900 be? Would it be, I'm imagining you could consider the flu clinic, but that would be a terrible decision to make because that's even more essential to public health. Were there other things? I'm just trying to get a sense of how you landed on this as being the best choice.
I actually didn't land on it. It was proposed to be cut.
Okay.
So this was not something I volunteered for this program to be cut.
Okay,
And I would say all of our other programs are funded through donations. So I don't know that there would be another particular line item, other than office supplies and things of that nature.
thanks.
Go ahead.
Nurse jumped significantly. Is it a full-time position or is it an hourly position or do we contract it out? How does that,
For this particular program,
in general in your budget,
Just scales.
the nurse cost went from $74,000 to $95,000.
okay, so ARPA funding, is that the question? ARPA funding pays
Yes.
additional 7.5 hours to full-time status?
Right, so Gail's position, Gail Johnson is a nurse, she was the 30 hours a week prior to the pandemic. Once pandemic hit, we've been supplementing her full-time to go with the ARPA funding. And this year, the ARPA funding is the last year of it for her. So they're proposing to use the clinical revolving fund to offset those 7.5 hours to keep her full-time.
So it's more like an accounting, it doesn't change what she
Right.
does on a daily basis, it just, since we don't have alternative fundings, it's coming to the town budget.
Right, so it's really staying the same because we're gonna take those funds and apply it against the budget in the beginning language of the operating article. And so we'll approve that just like we do like the $3,000 for the senior center fund. So it does have that funding tied to it.
Thanks.
Sure, absolutely. And I would just add that each vaccine reimburses our community between $25 and $45 for the nursing fee alone.
Okay,
So that goes in that account.
and food inspector, that's varying year to year. Why is it varying year to year, like 34 to 36 to 30 to 36 to 34?
Our longtime food inspector retired, and so we have a new person that came in who's climbing the steps again.
Okay,
The union contract.
She's relatively new, just over a year.
thank you.
Sure.
You also,
Yes.
okay, do you have any vacant positions right now?
We don't, we're full.
Okay.
Excited about it.
And the food inspector, is that full-time person or part-time?
So that's a part-time 18-hour position, it's not benefited.
Okay. And could you talk a little bit about this new regional health inspector and social worker grant or?
Sure, so the Department of Public Health is encouraging all communities across the state to look at regionalizing and utilizing shared services. So we partnered here in Westford, we're the host agent, we're partnered with Acton, Lowell, Dracut, and Westford. Right now, we share a regional community health and wellness coordinator position that's full-time, is an employee here at the Westford Health Department. And so for this phase of the grant, which we are in the third year of the grant, the group has decided, they proposed to the Department of Public Health that we'd like a regional social worker position, and also for social services for everything from our boarding cases, housing, to help any schools with any services they may need, youth services, things like that. And then the regional health inspector position, each community has asked for different things. For instance, the town of Acton needs help with their tobacco inspections. Westford would utilize the position for food education in our restaurants. It would also utilize any night and evenings. Right now, we're paying a lot of comp time to our inspector, our food inspector, for over 100 different food events that we have during the year, everything from Witches Woods to the carnivals and all kinds of strawberry festivals, things like that. Those all have to be inspected on nights and weekend events. So that position, like I said, for Acton, Westford, Lowell can use it for housing, and so different things like that. Pretty much what a health agent does.
It in your narrative, it said that you couldn't use these positions to replace existing positions. So I guess I'm just trying to get a sense of, what's the advantage of having these two extra shared positions? Do we have more capacity that's not being met?
In some instances, yes, but where unfortunately the grant does not allow any department across the states to supplant.
Yeah.
Because I would love to be able to, for instance, our nurse, I want to bring in our food inspector full time. But we could certainly use some additional assistance with different programming and inspections. I know I've reached out to the schools to see if what they need in our town's social worker, to see if there are any needs that are not being met for the social worker position. Can we use them where we are trying to find funding right now for the mobile clinician? Things like that, where mental health services are at the forefront and the need for both the schools and for the town side.
I do have one more, but if anyone else wants to jump in.
I'm not saying those are all grant funded then, but we're the host.
We are, so we take in the admin fees for this grant about $87,000 a year.
And does that grant expire at some point? Is there?
Right now, it has a date on it for 2038, and whether that funding will be available, as you all know.
Is it 2038? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if the funding will, every year the contract is up. Last year, the grant was for $291,000. They gave the community another $300,000.
That's not in our paperwork, then it's kind of accounted for outside of it, is that correct?
It's an excellent grant, right?
Yep. So we would just approve the amendment, I think was just received a month and a half ago.
Yeah, it's in the list, Heather, of the grants.
But it wouldn't be like like, we don't see the dollars flowing through the operating budget.
No, look at the operating budget
Okay.
there.
It's completely
It's not-
separate, kind of like just
Yeah.
that bonus or something.
Doesn't require town meeting vote or anything like that. It's
Yeah,
just-
okay, that's what I was getting at, okay. But, and when the grant, well, mine, does that cover if they're benefited, like
It does, it covers all of their equipment, it covers mileage, everything.
direct and indirect?
Printers at home, if they're hybrid positions, covers all of that, all of their health benefits.
And they would be on Westford's health insurance, is
They
that
are,
true?
if they choose to
If
take
they
out
choose to
insurance,
take it.
yes.
So then the grant would apply, it would go through your revenue line or something to account for the, because obviously their health insurance is probably paid for and debited to their.
We would just make a journal entry and put it into
Okay.
the trust.
Thank
Beth has her hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Beth.
I feel like as a social worker, I have to talk about the social work. So I was just wondering if you've coordinated at all with social services and like the rec department. I was learning about Worcester's rec department and how they are really integrating behavioral health, medical health, public health within recreation. And I thought that's a great idea because you want to get services to people where they are. So I'm wondering, in addition to the schools, if you're also coordinating with the recreation department.
We are, so we are currently speaking with not only the COA for the social work positions to see, again, I want to make sure where there's no overlap or we're not getting in anyone's lane with this position. But we also want to make sure we're meeting the needs. So I have reached out, as I said, to the schools, recreation, and COA. Right now, our community wellness coordinator for our department provides social emotional learning curriculum to the after-school programs in the recreation department, which for me is fascinating and exciting because for the first time, we're trying to help kids with mental health, provide mental health services, but also set them up for success. So they learn how to de-escalate situations and handle anxiety and stress at the K level, K to third grade level. So we're excited about that. So we do, to answer your question, we do work directly with the recreation department. We offer CPR classes and all kinds of things. So we can certainly reach out to them to see if they need more social services.
Anyone else? Oh, go ahead, John.
In your goals, you said you wanted to become nationally accredited. And at one time, when you were brought up with funds, the price tag for that was about 200,000, and then it was reduced to 100,000. Do you have funds in your budget for that? Or
We
is
do
it
not
some
right
kind of
now.
grant?
So we do use grant funding through the same shared services grant. We do pay a consultant that provides, not only helps us to manage this grant, but what they do is they help us meet accreditation requirements. When we came before the select board for community health assessment and an improvement plan of, again, $200,000, $100,000, that was to have a third party come in and do all that for us. They're helping us do it in a grassroots way in the background. That will take longer, certainly that's fine. But for instance, we're in the middle of our community health assessment right now, where we've invited all the stakeholders and committees here in Westford. We've just finished that process of collecting all our data here. And they're helping us put that together. One thing that won't be part of it, there won't be a survey that goes out to the community. We've reached out to stakeholders. So we are still working on accreditation, but it will take time.
Just one, I'm sort of trying to wrap my head around all of the different grants and positions and, not just in the health department, but there's, our community wellness coordinator, which is out of the town manager's office, and then there's a social worker in council on aging. You're bringing in another social worker that's regional. And it may just be in my head that it just seems so just kind of all over the place and disjointed a little bit, that I'm just a little concerned that, either there's overlap or things are missing. And I know you said you talked to people, but I think if you're not in the same department, it can be difficult. That was one of the budget task force recommendations, was to sort of look across all of that. So it's more just a comment of, more things seem to be expanding, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around all of that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, as the Board of Health has said, of the members and myself, and I would also say the staff in our department, we certainly feel as from the beginning that, it'd be great if both community health and wellness coordinators were under the health department, certainly. We work very close with Nicole. We do a lot of projects together. They facilitate a lot of projects together. But certainly it is hard, when it comes to applying for grants and programs. You certainly don't know what everyone's doing week to week. Okay. I will say though, for our department, we work very close with COA for their social worker. We have a lot of boarding and housing cases here in this community. And so we work directly with those kind of cases, and any needs that any resident has. But, so there's never really been any kind of issue or, that I would say on our end as the health department, we work hand in hand. And my understanding is that social work position has always been for more 55 and older. And over the years, those duties have expanded.
Right, it's not just 55 and over now,
Right.
yeah.
So Kristen did have a meeting last week with Ray, Allison, Christopher from COA, with Jennifer, and what was that meeting?
It was COA, the Community Wellness Department.
Oh, yes,
and,
so all those departments work together, so they're working on a way for efficiency to move forward with this and come back with some ideas. So those conversations are taking place. We don't have an answer for you tonight, but working on it. It's a long-term goal.
Okay, no, that sounds great. And one, I know this is really minor, but it sort of stuck out to me about the CPR training, and I think, Heather, it might have been your question, that the health department offers a class for $28, but the rec department also has a class for $90, so it just seemed,
Yeah, you'd have
the
to.
numbers jumped out at me,
you'd
and the
have to
fact that
ask the
we're both like two
recreation.
different departments, and then I happened to Google search, and the Red Cross has a class like every other night somewhere. And I'm just wondering, you have your list of accomplishments was huge, which, kudos to you. But I'm just wondering if maybe we need to narrow a little bit and, not try to sort of handle such a wide breadth of items. I don't know.
Yeah, as far as the CPR class, all I can say is that, our public health nurse position has provided that for years. Our MRC coordinator does those classes with her. Those funds are paid again by grants.
So is that totally separate from her day job, so to speak, or
No, so she does it here, but there's a limit. As an instructor, it is eight people, and certainly, for instance, we have students, one example is hoisted students at WA, those CPR classes every 2 years, if you will. So we provide those at no cost for the grant funds. But if we have a class in the evening, a church is looking for something here in the community, we do charge to come, and again, it only covers cost. We make a couple dollars off each class, so to speak. I would say less than a couple $100. So we just charge for the book, you need the card, and all your protections, respirator protections when you take the class. I can't speak to the cost for recreation.
No. Okay, thanks. Anything else from the department? Thank you, Ray.
Sure, no, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, so
Sorry that I have one of those state books. Thank you, have a good day.
thanks.
Good night now.
So move on to the Council on Aging, and if Jennifer Claro is on Zoom. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi,
Could you just give us a quick intro?
yeah, so I would like to say good evening to the select board, Kristen, and the FinCom members. I'd like to just update you on a few items before we kind of move into our fiscal year 25 budget. As you might have noticed, one of the items that will be a big change for us in fiscal year 25 is we are looking to move all of our maintenance line items pertaining to our COA budget to facilities. And also we are looking at, as in July, reducing our evening hours to 4 nights 4 nights a month versus 8 or 9 nights a month. And this has been supported by our Council on Aging Board. The COA has been working on a 3-year strategic plan with Mirhan Kiosian, who is a professional strategic planning facilitator. And we look forward to sharing this document with the public in the coming months once it's finalized. And as you all know, the Cameron Senior Center, we do serve adults age 55 and older. That has been supported by our COA board. The town social worker, as I was listening in your previous hearing, she was hired as, she is an actual geriatric social worker and was hired as the town's social worker for the Council on Aging. And basically, as she got more comfortable with her job and more people found out about that there was a town social worker, there were needs emerging for younger adults. So she was given the permission to assist younger adults, and the caseload has expanded. And that is one of the things that you will note in our budget for this year, as we are looking at additional funding for our social services department. Also, as you all know, we house the Westford Food Pantry, which operates each Wednesday night from 6 to 8 p.m., as well as on Friday mornings from 9 to 11. We also provide meeting space to town committees and staff when needed. And one of the things that we've been very involved in this past year is, we had several ARPA funded projects. In the last few months, we did move the mobile clinician under our town community wellness coordinator. So Nicole is actually overseeing that, the mobile clinician. We are actually doing all the administrative and financial aspects of that funding for the mobile clinician. And typically, the Cameron Senior Center serves close to 1,025 residents daily. So those are just some updates I wanted to share with you all, and I'll be glad to entertain any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much. Anybody have questions?
I have some.
Dennis?
I just wanted to ask, I happened to watch the presentation, I think, between you and the Board of Selectmen probably 2 weeks ago. We were in the audience watching, and the issue of fueling and the transportation costs came up, which I thought, I was very interested in that. So can you estimate the transportation provider, how much does that cost your budget each year, the transportation costs?
Yeah, so it's close to about so it's a total of about 158,000 for the past fiscal year. The last 2 years we have been short. We have been short in funding, and we had to pull it from other line items in our town budget, as well as our EOEA grant funding. The last year was the first year that we were actually able to participate in the ARPA funding for the gasoline. We did run out of funds for fuel last year, right around kind of the March. We do anticipate that will happen again this year. And you are correct. That is a concern, is trying to be able to maintain our transportation program, as well as we know our older adult population is increasing, and we are fortunate to also be experiencing the development of more diverse and affordable housing, which does help our older adult population. But we do anticipate there will be more people that will be moving into town that might, be low income and may need additional support services, and that will tax our transportation program. I did propose moving to a fee-based system this past year. I know I was pretty passionate about it, but I know there were some concerns. And so decided not to move forward with the fee-based structure, and looking at other funding sources. We did meet with Jeff Morset and Matt Salem yesterday, concerning the MBTA Communities Multifamily Overlay District. We do realize that with those new developments that there's going to be probably additional transportation that's going to be needed for our transportation program. I'm trying to see if there's anything that we can ask of the developers that are coming in that want to do these projects, if they can help support our transportation program, since it will be providing a service most likely to these communities. We're also looking at meeting with the Chelmsford COA director and dispatcher, Kingsborough COA director and dispatcher, and Littleton COA director and dispatcher, to see if there's an opportunity for us to do what they call a 5310 grant. And this particular grant funds collaboration across municipalities, and they like new service. So we're going to try to see if there might be an opportunity for us to do some collaboration and to meet some needs that we all might be facing. So those are just some of the funding strategies that we're working on. We're also looking at doing a community appeal for our transportation program, as well as educating the town on the benefits of our transportation program, utilizing our Friends of the Cameron Senior Center to help raise funds. So, one of my focuses now and in the fiscal year 25, we'll be looking to continue to maintain our transportation program and try to prepare for the additional costs in the coming years.
Well, I got a question for you on that. Now, I understand that, so basically, the subscribers to that program don't contribute anything to its operation. Is that correct?
So Dennis, actually they do. It's a donation-based service. We don't. If someone doesn't pay for the ride, we don't say you have to pay for it or you can't use our transportation program. Currently, our geographical area, we service Acton, and that's an $8 donation. Air is an $8 donation. Carlisle is a $6 donation. Chelmsford is a $6 donation. Concord is an $8 donation. Groton is a $6 donation. Littleton is a $6 donation. And of course, Lowell is an $8 donation, and Westford is a $3 donation. And when we looked at that structure versus if we moved it to a fee-based system, there was only really about $1,000 difference. And when we looked a little bit further at the administrative costs of moving to a fee-based structure, it really didn't outweigh the advantage of moving to a fee-based system. So hence, that's why just looking at alternative funding sources outside of our donation-based system.
Yeah, but as I remember your testimony at that last hearing, you were only getting a very low number of contributions. I'm somehow 5% sticks in my mind. Is that correct? So everybody's running for basically nothing.
Yeah, it's not a substantial amount, but it's also it could support it, but it's certainly not going to cover the majority of the cost that our program is seeking. So we would, even if we move to a fee-based system, again, we're only looking about $1,000 difference. We would have to do additional administrative personnel as well as, submit, have bills.
Can I just jump in and maybe suggest that we come back with just some numbers put out? Just kind of spelled out as far as what you thought the administrative overhead and what your donations and versus fees would bring in.
I mean, I would think you would have the administrative overheads, you're expecting the donations already, you're not getting them, but there should be something in place.
Yeah.
No, we are getting the donations. I was just saying, if we, the only variance between if we move to the fee-based system and we stay to the donation-based system, we're only looking at about $1,000, $1,000 difference. And that is not including the administrative costs that it would take for us to implement a fee-based.
Hear from Dan O'Donnell.
Yeah, so donations for the year, we're estimating about $4,000.
Donations are 4,000, okay.
And just, point of reference, when the select board discussed this with Jennifer, one of our concerns was that we knew we've got a budget imbalance, we knew we have a potential for an override, we've also got an increase in water bills, and so our view has been, of all the places in town to look for someone to have a user fee, we don't want to task the seniors with that. So even if it was a good idea for small money, that was our view, was that this is not the cards cover to look under for nickels.
Great.
Can I just add to the homework thing? It might be helpful to see some statistics on usage too, because I think I'm reading that it's 180,000 between the two, the LRTA and what we pay. And that doesn't count whether there's benefits on that full-time person, so it could be 200,000, so I'm just curious about usage as well.
Okay.
My thoughts are along the same lines, but where I'm thinking is, we have to provide the service, that's a sunk cost, right? And converting the donation to fee is forcing some sort of a recovery, but not knowing what the recovery is, I don't want to put our senior citizens into forcing to pay.
Yeah, I think we're getting into policy though, which is your area.
Well, I'm trying to say is, what would be the recovery if we switch the policy, right? And if that is minimal, we don't want to go through that. That's without that quantification of what would be the incremental recovery.
Yeah, but I think we don't have the information here in front of us, at least
No, that's
for
what
us
I want.
to kind of see it spelled out, so.
When it comes back, that's what information which helps us have a quantitative decision.
And I think on those statistics, like in Westford versus out of Westford, because we're paying for it, I'm assuming we're not getting any supplemental from Carlisle or some of the other towns.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're gonna move away from the transportation, good, okay. Beth, do you have something?
Well, I think we've kind of talked about the fee enough, maybe enough, but I was just wondering if you could raise the suggested amount. I mean, if the costs have increased, I mean, they've raised the bus fee for the kids. Is there could you raise the suggested donation? And then also I was wondering if it was income-based, the fee that you were considering, was it income-based or was it just like a flat fee?
So regarding your first question regarding the suggested donation as an increase, that would definitely be a discussion that I would have with our board. We have not increased that amount. And, to be honest with you, we have so many people that understand the importance of that transportation that they're provided, and they're on such fixed incomes, or some might have a little bit more fluidity in their income. And I think knowing that, we were looking at a fee-based system, I think that there would people that would be more apt to want to even support the donation base if we were to increase it, if they could, because it's a very reliable service. We have wonderful drivers, and we have a dispatcher that is incredibly dedicated to trying to serve as many seniors as possible. And so, to your point, I think it's definitely worth talking about at our COA board meeting as an increase in the donation. Again, it's not mandatory, but I do think a lot of people do see a value to it, and they know that we're struggling with providing that service and covering the cost. So it's a great question, and yeah, that's something definitely we'll look at. And regarding the fixed fee, we just looked at it. We were just trying to look at how we could kind of help absorb the cost. So no, it would not be based on income.
Anybody else?
I love that Dennis brought up the vehicles, because I'm always harping on vehicles, but I still have vehicle-related questions. These vans are owned by LRTA, but we insure them, they're on our fleet list.
I believe we do insure them.
Okay, and then with this, they're gas, so would they be refueling with this whole refuel plan?
Well, the grant is set amount to 107,000, so we can use that on maintenance, personnel, fuel.
But like instead of using the WEC card or whatever the heck it is, would they be?
Yeah, we all,
If they refilled at the DPW, would they have some savings in how they operate? Or is it just kind of, they would be away from that task force recommendation of centralized fueling?
I would think
The cost of
we're
fuel is the
paying
cost
for
of fuel, so.
but
yeah.
we're
Right, but
paying
I'm
for
saying,
the
will we
fuel,
make them go to DPW to refuel, or will they just fuel wherever?
I would think they'd be included, but let me confirm that.
That's what I'm curious
Yes,
about, whether
okay.
they'd be included.
Okay. I had one last question on the senior rebate program. One of your differences between the needs-based budget and the constrained Prop 2.5 was a $9,000 reduction in that senior rebate program. Would that still cover, it seemed like in the past you had about 10 people take advantage of that program, is that correct? And
it's a good question, yeah.
Yeah, would this new amount still allow you to have those 10 people?
So the way that we looked at it is I worked with our town social worker that helps administer this program. And basically what we're seeing in the past few years is we've seen a reduction in participation. And on the other side, we're also seeing where town departments are a little more resistant to having someone new come into their department because, they're so comfortable with the way they do things. And sometimes it's, you just don't know how much time you're going to have to train and provide direction. So that is why we would be able to continue to do the 10 people. I know Kristen and I talked about that. She was a little concerned about that decision. And, I just explained to her that, we're really, struggling with departments wanting to participate. And then we also have just seen a reduction in residents wanting to participate in the program. Basically, sometimes the jobs aren't what they're looking for. So to your question, we still would be able to cover the people that wanted to participate in the program.
Great. Any last?
Tom's hand is up. You
Tom,
can't see it on the
I can't see
screen.
it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, so a couple things. On the transportation, how frequently is it a single rider in one of the vans? And the reason I ask is because they aren't the most fuel efficient vehicles. I know that there's limitations with accessibility, right, with chairs and walkers. But I wonder if there's a more efficient way to provide that transportation to some people. That's the first question.
So I just want to make sure I understood what you were saying. So are you asking me how many people are duplicated or unduplicated? Are you saying maybe yeah, you could.
So how often is it a single rider on a transport to say,
okay, sure.
the grocery store or whatever?
Okay, good question. So where we really get, Where we struggle sometimes in trying to provide, to get as many people on the van is, one is we are mandated by the LRTA that we transport anyone that is disabled. That is a priority. We can't, and we transport a gentleman every day to work. And, it's not everybody goes that direction where he works. So it does sometimes limit how many people we can move at one time. When we have to transport people to Lowell or Concord to go to the hospital, again, not everybody's going that direction. And when we do that, it ties up the van, for about 4 hours and our driver. So that is so again, we do have limitations on how many people we can transport based on some of our mandates. And, we do prioritize medical as a priority. That's our priority right. It's medical rides, groceries, senior center. But grocery runs, I will tell you, are packed. So we do transport, our dispatcher has 2 runs. That's one of our busier routes on Tuesday. It's a full day of transporting people to the grocery store. So the vans are packed, are more full on grocery run days than versus a day that we might be transporting someone for medical to Concord or Lowell.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question is not necessarily for you. It keeps coming up as we talk about departments with fleets. And I know that it's on the horizon to look at fleet management, and fleet fueling, but I'm really starting to struggle with not making that a priority. That's as a general statement, I would like to see some more effort. I know it's tough with the budget going on, but to see what the savings across the board would be for fleet fueling. That seems to me like it would make sense in being able to provide relief for every department's budget that uses vehicles.
Anything else for Council on Aging? Great, thank you very much, Jennifer.
All right, thank you.
So we'll move on to Veteran Services, and I see Ryan.
Hello.
Ryan, can you give us the 30-second version of Veteran Services budget, please?
All right. We cover, it's me. I got a senior assistant for 4 hours. We got a veterans tax work-off program for 5 veterans. We got programs and activities that pretty much covers flags around town, and events. And then meetings and conferences. We have 3 meetings per year for training. And then the Veteran Services budget that covers Chapter 115 clients. Those are the veterans that are around the 200% poverty level. It's like a financial aid benefit. We provide guidance and help in filing VA claims for disabilities, aid in attendance, appeals, pensions, survivor benefits, burial, retirement jobs, job searches, education, and other benefits as well, along with the town events and servicing the flags around town. That should sum it up pretty much.
Questions? Heather?
I just have one comment. Should this line item for the work-off program be reduced, and demand is there for our veterans, that I would hope that somebody would come to FinCom Reserve and ask for that to be filled. I mean, if we're not spending it now, I'm fine with it being reduced, but I would hate to see a veteran show up and be told that they can't access the program because of the budget.
So with the veteran one, we have 5 spots. I think since COVID started, it has reduced, and obviously, just like Jennifer said, departments wanting people in there or veterans volunteering for this has gone down. So I believe, I mean, with the reduced to 3, we should still be able to cover the need we have right now. I assume it will be going up in the future, back up to 5.
Anything else? Anybody from the public has questions, please just stand up or raise your hand if you're on Zoom. All right, I think we're good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chief, you're up. Police Department.
Good evening, everyone. I brought Captain Jim Pelican with me. Jim is being promoted to deputy chief with the retirement of Ron Blaskus, who's served the community for over 32 years. His last day is tomorrow. 1:30, we'll have some coffee and some pastries and everything. So if anyone wants to stop by to wish him well in his retirement, we'd appreciate it. So trying to get Jim's feet wet, bring him in and show him how all this goes on. So,
I'll let you give us the highlights of.
So, just like most everybody else, we were asked to prepare 2 different budgets, and I'll start with a budget without an override scenario. The overall budget would be a 1.09 increase, even though there's, without an override, we are projecting a deficit. The 1.09% increase includes both personnel services and our expense side. The personnel services, even though it's going up 1%, it does require us to eliminate 2 full-time police officer positions. So, and that would be through attrition. Hopefully we will be able to plan that out so we don't have to actually look someone in the face and lay them off from this type of position. And how that will play, how that would look, eventually what we'll see is we'll see a reduction in our scheduled staffing. Some of the patrols that you may see, most certainly our opportunities for directed patrols, such as like the boat patrol, bike patrol, address specific complaints, traffic complaints, things of that nature, where we'll often put on extra people. And some of our community engagement activities we'd have to come back on. So in pretty much all you really see on the personnel services side on the non-override budget scenario is the reduction in benefits or wages that those 2 positions would be associated with. The expenses are going up are requested to go up by 1.94%. And that's really, most of it is because of our dedication to go green and switch over to hybrid cruisers. The cost on those has gone up about $4,000 each year since we began that program. It's about $12,000 now above where we started. And we did budget for 3 this year, so it went up about $4,200 per vehicle. But what is in there for those 3 cruisers does include all the upfit, light, siren. And again, in the past, occasionally we've been able to transfer the equipment going into the newer vehicles, but when Ford switched their body style a couple of years ago, we're still catching up with those vehicles. One of the other things that you'll see on the expenses side of our budget, which is consistent actually through both of the budgets, because we believe it's incredibly important, is we were able to secure funding over the past several years through donations for a health and wellness application, which really provides an excellent benefit for all first responders in Westford. It is in the police department budget this year, or has been requested to be in the police department budget this year, but does cover all 110 police, fire, and public safety dispatchers for download. And if you have any questions about that later on, we'll be happy to explain all of that. One of the other things that both budgets do include is a transition over to a new taser service. So we currently do carry tasers. I believe they're an incredible use of force option that protects the officers and protects those people that actually, when we use them, yes, it's traumatic, yes, it's damaging, but it creates less of an injury for the person than for the officer. So in the long run, it's actually much safer to have a taser program than to not. That's when you really see a lot of officer injuries, is when they're required to go hand in hand with a combative subject. And this kind of helps everybody create a little bit of distance, hopefully gain some instant compliance and be able to take people into custody without further or serious injury. And then the last thing, one of the last things that you'll see in there is there is a new K-9 budget line. We've had the K-9 program since I've been a police officer here in Westford, since 2000, and I believe that it came in around 96 to 98, somewhere around there, with Detective David Canal, who's now retired. But for the longest time, we haven't had a separate K-9 budget. We've relied on donations, which have they've slowed down. I don't know if it's because of all the other different engagement activities that we try to fundraise for, or if it's specific to the program. Maybe we could do a better job of pushing that out there, but we have been receiving about a $500 donation annually, and that's about it. We also used to receive some veterinary services complimentary, which we no longer receive. So we did start to track the cost of the food and veterinary services, and it works out to about $2,000, which we've been able to absorb in our office supplies line the past several years. But as everybody knows, with inflation, the cost of our office supplies has gone through has increased as well. So I think it's time to really properly fund our K-9 program, where we're really not trying to make ends meet just to cover the basic needs of these two animals that we have. And if you have questions about the K-9 program, I'm always happy to answer those. But under the no override situation, we did remove the $2,000 that was set aside for the K-9 program from our office supplies line. So moving on to the override situation, if an override is passed, there is an overall requested increase of 3.56% overall, with a 3.65 for our our personnel side. So the 3.65 would represent our full staffing, which we currently have, and was authorized back in 2018 between the Board of Selectmen and Town Manager. We finally were budgeted that 50th officer 2 years ago. We are still currently trying to get there because of various different reasons. But it has allowed us to almost essentially be in a constant hiring state, because with how long it takes to get an officer on the road, even if outside of civil service, if we were to hire somebody that had a criminal justice degree, it still takes a significant amount of time, almost a year, between when we get them through the door, have them interviewed, psychological, physical, and then pass the requirements to get into a police academy, then 5 to 6 months in a police academy and 3 months of our field training program before they're ever allowed to work by themselves and fill a shift. So you can imagine the things that can go wrong within that training that immediately sets us back, which we've actually had occur several times over the past 3 years, where we've had either a person in almost completing the academy no longer continue. We've had people that we thought were excellent hires that we've tried to assist physically to be able to attain the necessary physical requirements to get into a police academy that has taken 6 to 7 months, not be able to get over the hump, so to speak, to get into an academy physically, where we've had to terminate their employment. But that's 7 months or 8 months where we've had or attempted to get that person on the road, and that's prior to any of their training. So by having these additional positions that we're constantly trying to fill, it allows us to really always have somebody in the queue, and hopefully delay some of those people coming out. Also in the override budget, we did request an adjustment to our overtime line. We really haven't had an adjustment to our overtime line since 2018. We did have a slight one in 2020 for COVID, and I believe that was, unfortunately, although I was involved in the budget, I believe it had to do with just COVID funding and the worry that if we had a shift go down, how we would be able to address it. Particularly, it came in March. There was a lot of discussion about staffing around public safety, because we were going to be exposed to it without, we had no choice. So, we did have an addition made to our overtime budget at that time, although we did stay with our original $396,000. I think it was actually well under. We did make it through the initial, phase of COVID, actually, very well. So, this is the first time we've actually asked for an adjustment with our overtime line since 2018, due to contractual increases that have occurred over the past several years. And those overtime increases not only addresses our backfilling our required shifts, but it also allows us to do some more of these community events. It does allow us to do more directed patrols to address specific complaints, traffic complaints, crime complaints, the quarry, all these wonderful things that we continue to get year upon year upon year that we're trying to come up with new novel ways to address. And then moving on to our expenses side is a 2.66% request. Again, it's the hybrid cruiser, it's the health and wellness app, it's the taser, and it's the budget line. And where one of the main differences in this is the $2,000 that remains in the office supplies budget, so that way we can address any shortages that we may have. And with that.
Thanks. Heather?
You know, I like talking about those cars, so,
Yes.
and I've said it multiple times to different audiences. And sometimes when we're talking about the budget, we explain to the public, there's the operating, and then there's this other bucket, you can't use one-time funds. But I'm just gonna reiterate, I think that these police cruisers need to go through capital, just like every single item is not that different from the Chromebooks. Capital's not gonna not fund the cruisers because they're of high importance. Just like we fund the Chromebooks every year, so just putting that out there, it's a comment.
And I understand that because we do hear that, I've heard that the past couple of years. You know, under the current definition of capital, they're reoccurring annual expenses, so, you know, technically, and it is exempt. And I would say, yes, they are high priority items that we need to have funded. In the past, there were times when they weren't properly funded because they were in capital. And it really did kind of hamper some of the operations of the police department. I think that was one of the, this is before my time, but my understanding through Chief McEnany in the past is that was really one of the main pushes to get it outside of capital, so that way you could plan appropriately for your deployment of forces, so.
Yeah, so I get that, I don't know if capital.
I'm happy to throw an extra one on capital.
And you can do that and put your 3 in and then throw in the
Yeah.
extra one, but I feel like if you free up $200,000. I mean, it's patrolman, right? I mean, so. Yeah, so anyway, my point is for the other audience. And then I just have 2 other comments. I know you said the canine donations are dropping off, and I might be missing this because my kids are a little older, but they saw a canine demonstration behind Rodenbush one year and loved it. And you put out a bucket and they'd be like, hey, can we give the dog $10?
But is that really appropriate for a police department to do?
The
Right?
canine
So
demonstration?
solicit donations, that way we can properly fund one of our programs. I believe me, I hear, we got, Lieutenant General's out shelling all the time. He's really trying to get as much funding as possible for our community events, you know, which we actually have several of them coming up to look here in Ontario.
And I do feel like the town should pay for the canines, but if you needed a fancy bed or something.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, and then the only other thing that I don't really understand is the police department encumbers things like utilities, but we don't do that in the other departments. So I don't understand the different accounting approaches there, because you're fully encumbering utilities. You don't know what the utility is gonna be until you get the bill, so I don't get the
It's
logic there.
administrative ease just to put in one purchase order for the year for the utilities, and then they just apply the bills against that purchase order, so.
But why don't you do that for like other departments?
We encourage it, but not everybody does it, so it's just easier to do, like they're doing it in a efficient manner.
So we do that for our utilities, I believe there's a portion for our cruiser maintenance, both with the service that we go to for our oil changes to maintain our cruise, but also like our tires. We do go through quite a few tires every year as well. Sometimes it's curves, sometimes it's actually just wear and tear. But, so those are the types of things where we know that they're, when we make those purchases, it's gonna be over $1,000, so when we encumber it with Dan, and have those discussions beforehand, it's, you know, I don't think we encumber the entire line either, I think it's just a majority of, you know, of the projection.
So I'm wondering if it's a task force thing, then like, are there efficiencies gained in any way by
Time.
learning off of these guys?
Good question, I don't know.
Yeah, accounting does train people as they come in, so there's only a handful of buildings out there that, you know, we're doing this for, so, but any purchase above $1,000 in town requires a purchase order, it needs to be approved by Kristen, so. You have controls in place.
I wanted to add on to the cars just before we move on. So the cruisers, you said that the purchase cost has gone up, it's an additional $4,200 times 3. That's $4,200 from last year though, correct?
Per cruiser
Just
from
per-
last year,
per-
yes.
Per cruiser, okay. And then, that's not the difference between a gas versus a.
No,
Right.
the pure gas cruisers are actually a little bit lower. I think last year when I looked and we did get quotes on both, I think I actually provided that to FinCom last year too, and there was about a $4,000 difference between a full gasoline cruiser and the hybrids.
What I'm trying to figure out in my head is if the $12,000 that you said you're saving in maintenance and fuel efficiency, if that's offsetting the extra cost for the hybrids.
Yeah, I think that we're finally starting to realize that now. I think even this year in this budget, so our original request was around $107,000 or $108,000 for our fuel, and then we got some updated figures when we worked with Dan, and Dan reduced it to, I believe, $90,000 for fiscal '25.
Okay.
So just the drop from 117, I think, from last year down to, or maybe this year, I can't remember, but down to 90,000 is a significant cost saving. So, and we're about 3/4 of the way through the fleet. I think we have 7 or 8 hybrid cruisers right now. For some reason, I'm drawing a blank, but it's either 7 or 8. And then with this order, we should only have probably 1 left of our line cars that needs to be replaced. So we are starting to realize that savings, and it is starting to offset.
Great. Next, Dennis.
So that savings, basically, we're in a wait and see attitude with the hybrid vehicles then, right, to see how it plays out?
Yeah, so we have a lot of factors right now with the auto workers strike that have just occurred. We put in our order July 1, and it got rejected because they weren't manufacturing any 2023s anymore or 2024s. And the window for 2025 hybrids was extremely limited. It was supposed to open in November, then the strike hit. So we just, I want to say about a month ago, had to go to the board and do a purchase order, because we couldn't even order the cruisers without a purchase order, saying that we commit to purchase those cars. And one of the things that we were running into, and I know Dennis, with your history, you understand that a lot of these police supply places, a department the size of Westford that's only putting in a cruiser order for 3 or 4 cars is going to be one of the last served.
Right.
And that's what we've run into the past several years, where Dan can probably attest, where we've encumbered our cruiser line and not even received our cruisers until August or September. So what we're trying to do this year, and the reason why we had to do the purchase order, is order through a local dealer that gives commitment to give us the cruisers on the state bid price, which was Jarvis Ford. So our cruiser maintenance officer is working with an individual over at Jarvis Ford to make sure we get that order in. It has been placed, so if the vehicles come in, we should be able to get our allotment a lot earlier and hopefully get some of these cars on the road.
And just a note, congratulations to Captain Alauskas for his retirement. His retirement offers both our town and him an opportunity, right? He's gonna be going off to retirement, but for years, you and I have talked about the staffing at the higher levels. And I just wanted to reiterate that, about the way that the captain position is utilized. And I assume that the captain of operations, oversees what, 3 lieutenants for each shift?
Oversees the entire patrol division. Yes.
Okay, so What does the SSD commander do?
So the SSD commander is a lieutenant, and he oversees all the criminal bureau, and detectives. So there's 3 general detectives, our narcotics detective, family service detective, and the 2 SROs.
So what's the difference between the SSD commander and the detectives? Are they one and the same, or are they?
They're one and the same, so that's the entire unit. There is a, 3 years ago, we added a detective sergeant, just because the nature and complexity of some of the investigations that we've been starting to see, the additional requirements on the SRO and our narcotics detectives, just the general knowledge that these individuals need to have really required us to put a second supervisor in there to make sure that all the needs in that division would be met, because like you had mentioned a little bit ago, it is a 24/7 operation. So having only one supervisor, that is outside of the span of control. So we did want to make sure we addressed it, so we were properly supervising those individuals and supporting them in the way that we really need to.
Okay, so you mentioned span of control, because it's an important thing here. It helps us, particularly when we're talking about efficiencies. So the captain of patrol operations has 3, he's reporting 3. Why cannot the court prosecutor and the K-9 officer also report to that operations officer? Because what I'm getting at is, if you had them reporting, because they're aligned, right? Your SSD commander could basically, generally, detectives report directly to the chief of police, and that's how the operation goes. And then you could group your maintenance worker, records department, records supervisor, administrative assistant under the office manager, and you would eliminate 1 position for captain, which would save you 140K, right? Maybe 150K, which could open up and save positions for 2 officers if you were put to the test on it. You follow me? So I just want you to.
I understand.
Yep.
I completely disagree with you.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just want to make sure you were aware of it, that's all.
Dennis, we've had this conversation many times, no matter.
All right.
I just think that the idea of reducing any supervision from the police department, particularly now, with the expansion that this town's undergoing, the possibility of the MBTA, the post certifications, the new requirements from the DA and the reports. I can't even wrap my head around reducing the supervisors that we have with what is required of our officers at this point.
Yeah, I mean, because right now, you have total, what, 37 officers total right now? 37 total officers in the department, is that, I was adding up your.
No, we have 50, we have
50, okay, 50. Because if whatever you can do to expand that supervisory ratio is going to help out on costs and gets more people on the road.
Which I agree, but we have done this in the past where we've done our supervisory comparisons with other communities. Our percentages are there, as is the staffing, the actual staffing, the positions themselves. So, we may have a deputy and 2 captains, someplace may have a deputy and 2 XO lieutenants that are essentially doing the same, they are getting a bump in pay over the other lieutenants that would fall in line with what our captains do. So the positions, the pay, everything falls in line with what other communities are doing.
Okay, and the last thing I have for you was on the, and you referenced it yourself. You had 18 officers in the last 5 years leave, and you're basically dealing with a rate of about maybe 3 per year, which is about 18 grand for us as far as training these guys, which is a lot of, first of all, it's a loss of knowledge and understanding and training people, right, which is a problem. And then there's also the money loss. And we've talked about before you even were talking about this with your predecessor. Have you looked at what the reason is for the turnover? All right.
We do exit interviews with everybody that leaves, because there is the real fear that if there's a culture in the police department that's forcing people to look elsewhere, it needs to be addressed. That's one of the things that we've committed to over at the PD is to try and prioritize the employee health and where they stand within the department, have open conversations with them. So when an employee leaves, it is deeply felt, and I think everybody over there understands that and knows that leave. So you did mention the 18 that have left in the past 5 years. We did have, went to state police, retired, retired, right? So most of them did retire. We had a lateral, we did have a lateral transfer over them with doing PD. That individual was making $20,000 more a year. Kind of a big motivator. We did have another officer retire, terminated. We did have an officer that was in the academy that was terminated.
Okay.
Before he became a full law enforcement officer. We've had several people that have left law enforcement that have been employees for 10 years and under, because various reasons.
Going to a happier life?
Probably, yeah, probably, right? So, but it's a tough job. It's not for everybody. Sometimes there's a mental adjustment that has to occur. You have to be able to compartmentalize, and again, that's one of the reasons why we're pushing that health and wellness app, because you know, those things sneak out of the box. You want to be able to deal with them. To be honest, you know, I've been doing this for 25 years. There's still things that pop up occasionally that bother me, and I've been an active supporter of or active participant in therapy and other avenues, because if you don't take care of yourself and your own mental health, you're never going to be able to help anybody in the community. So I think people realize at certain points in their career that maybe this is no longer for them, or they try to get help and it doesn't work the way they want it to, and they move on. And again, we've tried to address this with all the employees that have left. I can say that I'm proud of the fact that most of the ones that have left since I've been chief have left law enforcement because they realized they either don't want to do it anymore, or there was a better opportunity, or they thought there was a better opportunity out there that maybe either didn't work out or did work out. Or we just had an officer leave to go to Stone PD. I was very reluctant to allow that civil service transfer, but he grew up in that community. How do you tell him no? He wants to go serve his community. And then we just had an officer that left to go work at Massport. Again, $20,000+ more to go work for a private police department down the seaport. And he grew up working at the seaport with his dad, because his dad was a seafood distributor.
So when we have this big issue with education about the competitiveness, are you basically saying we have an issue with competitiveness in our pay for the police officers?
I think for our area, I think it's getting close. I think one of the things that we do have, the patrol officers, we got back into their contract, was the full education incentive, which will be fully realized June 30th of 2025. Where it goes to the original Quinville percentages, because that is a competitive advantage in this area. The base pay itself is starting to fall behind just a little bit, not a lot, a couple $1,000, but the departments that people have left to go to are massive departments. Methuen's 100+ people. I mean, the captains over there were making close to $400,000 a year. Yeah, that got squared away finally.
She's going to jail. So.
Yeah. So there's just a lot of there's been a lot of kind of jockeying for, particularly in the non-civil service area, right? So we're surrounded by, you know, as you go east, you start to see a lot more civil service departments. As you go west, a lot of those departments have come out of civil service. So like Littleton, Groton, Air, those are all non-civil service departments. But although we're bigger, we're busier, their base pay is, Littleton and Air are actually, their top step patrol officers are actually higher than ours. But when you throw in our full educational incentive, when that finally kicks in, we will be, you know, we'll be ahead of them. But it is education dependent. So if you're a veteran and you come out, you're not receiving any additional benefit. Of course, we encourage our officers to go back to school and at least finish up an associate's degree. The more education that you have, I think the better decision that you're prone to make. So, and I think we've seen that. We've seen a lot of our officers go back and get advanced degrees over the past several years. Captain included, he just completed his master's degree last year.
Yeah.
So
I think
it's something that we're aware of and working on.
6 of those 18 are end of career retirements due to 25 to 32 years, so okay, that's a third of those.
Before we move on, can I just ask a basic question, because I don't get it? What does civil service mean when you say there's more or less?
That's a big question.
I just don't know what that.
Yeah.
Just-
So civil service is a state-run agency that originally was created to try to cut back on nepotism and cronyism. So a lot of communities within Massachusetts, the political animal that Massachusetts is, opted into the civil service. And civil service essentially runs their own testing programs, which they've waived the fee. So if anybody listening has anybody that they know that wants to be a police officer, sign up for the civil service exam, they've waived the late fee up until January 31st, I believe. So anybody that wants to become a police officer that for a civil service department like Westford has to take the civil service exam. Veteran, high school graduate, college graduate, doctorate, doesn't matter. They have to take the civil service exam. And then you're ranked based on your score on that. So when we have one job, I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. When we have one job opening, there's a formula that they have, 2 + 1 equals N, right? So you get 2 times N plus 1 is however many names you get. So if we have one opening, we get the top 3 names off of our list. Now we can bring them in, takes a couple weeks to even be able to call them in because there's timeframes associated with it. We bring them in, we find that none of those 3 candidates are suitable, but for various reasons. We have to now call for another list and it begins the entire process. So it can get complicated. So once they're hired, we have medicals, psychologicals, which we've always done, but now demanded by post. That's the new police oversight type thing. And then there's what's called a PAT, which is physical aptitude test. You gotta jump over a wall, pull a trigger, be able to handcuff something, jump like up and down some steps, stuff like that. And once you pass that, now you're qualified to go to an academy, obviously background and everything. And then you get onto the job. Like you go to the academy, you get onto the job. If you want a promotion, you have to sign up for a civil service promotion. So, and they do the same thing, whether it's sergeant, for lieutenant, captain, or deputy, or even chief, because I'm a civil service chief. So where we run into kind of the issues is it takes a long time just to get the names, and then it takes even longer to go through the entire process. Some departments in the area have moved away from civil service. The benefit of civil service is that you're prioritizing local candidates, both veterans and those with education. There are some protections involved in it too, mediation and arbitration, for any disciplinary history, disciplinary issues, stuff like that. And it does kind of eliminate some of the favoritism, but or doesn't eliminate it totally, right? So things can still happen. So it is it's a complex system. The state's actually looking at it right now as part of that police reform. One of the mandates was that civil service was going to be looked at. There's actually a report that they've just put out, like they're changing the formulas and a whole bunch of other stuff, but it does complicate. It's good and it's bad. It is, I do believe that it's good for promotional purposes. I think it's got a nice structure to it. Everybody understands it. They, everybody kind of goes through the same type of training and studying to be able to move forward. But the entry level itself I do believe is overly complex, and it does restrict our ability to branch out for a candidate pool, particularly when it comes to diversity. But I don't know that if we came out of civil service that we're going to be able to diversify our candidate pool much more than what we already have. So, sorry, wordy.
That's okay, I just, I know what you refer to it, and I had no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, sorry.
Rigid bureaucracy.
There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that.
So I think we have Tom, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I do. A couple quick things. One is kind of following up on Heather's point about the cruisers, and I guess it's a question for Dan, whether or not we would have the capacity this year to move those cruisers to capital for this year, and whether or not that would break the model if we could do it as a one-off. I get the fact that it can kind of go really either way. So, but consistency is key. The other one is I'm wondering if the PD gets state grants for traffic enforcement and things like that. The community I work for, I know, gets those, and they help with some of the, I think what you were saying for some of those shifts to be able to really address specific traffic concerns.
Tom, I can answer that question for you. I've been writing municipal road safety traffic grants the last couple of years. In FY '23, we were just $1 shy of being awarded $24,000. That included traffic enforcement, traffic safety equipment, pedestrian bicycle safety equipment, and non-enforcement activities. In FY '24, we were just awarded $34,274, so $11,000 more this year for the same categories that I just mentioned. And we've started the equipment purchases, and we're in our second month of traffic enforcement campaigns.
So, and then Tom, to address your other part of the question, some of our community engagement stuff, we're actually partnering right now with the Littleton Police Department and Chelmsford Police Department for a regional community policing grant that should help fund our Youth Police Academy and some of the other initiatives that we've been trying to do. We really found that it was incredibly beneficial for us to be doing those types of projects. Chelmsford's been doing some of this stuff for years, and Littleton really has, Abu, one of the guys that works over there, it really has found a nice little niche and penchant for being able to write grants. So we're very optimistic that we should be able to get a significant amount of money for some of these community policing initiatives that we're working on. So fingers crossed on that.
Which academy were you referring to? Did you say it was a regional academy or something?
Our youth
Oh,
academy.
okay, I got you. All right.
Yeah, so if we do receive this community policing funding, we're probably gonna do a regional, and we'll probably run multiple classes. So that would be pretty good. And I think it would be beneficial to our youth too, to get to know some kids from different communities as well. And they'll get great swag.
Any other questions?
I think Beth has a question. I
Okay,
think.
Beth, go ahead.
I just have a question about the training costs. Are any of the sportsman club in town donating space for training? And if they were to revoke that, would that increase the cost of training, or are there other options for training other than the sportsman clubs?
So I know that there was some mention of that, but when I had spoken with the president and other board members down at the Westford Sportsman's Club, they said they never had any intention of doing that. But on the off chance that they did, we do have our indoor range. However, we try not to use it because it's a lead-free, non-toxic range. So the cost of that type of ammunition for training and the amount of ammunition that we're required to shoot would make it a little prohibitive. But there are other ranges around that I'm sure we'd be welcome at. I know we've had conversation with the Tingsboro Sportsman's Club in the past. Harvard Sportsman's Club actually has, I think they have about 3 dozen different ranges down there. So we would be able to partner with one of these other community sportsman's clubs. The only cost that we incur is we do have our 2 firearms officers have memberships to that club. We do a lot of things actually with the club when they do their youth events, their fishing derby and some of their other events. We do have officers go down there. It's a great way to meet people and get to know some of the kids in the community and some of the adults. So we would be able to pull it off. I don't think we'd incur much additional cost if we weren't able to shoot there anymore. There are plenty of other ranges that we'd be able to partner with, even if it's just offering, one of our firearms instructors to run a class or something like that. There usually is a little quid pro quo when it comes to these types of things, just so we don't incur an additional cost. There is an impact to these ranges when we shoot there because there is the additional brass, there is the additional toxic, kind of leftovers in their berms and stuff. So the Westford Sportsman's Club has been incredibly generous with us over the past, I think we've been shooting there since about 2010. And prior to that, we shot at the Groton Outdoor Range down by the Groton Highway Department. And I was an instructor up until 2018. So we'd be more than capable of making a different relationship if we needed to.
But it's a very good community policing opportunity to be able to be at the club.
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it. I've spoken to the membership a couple times over there as well.
It's important.
Any other questions? John?
I'm interested in your patrol division, in the override situation, I think you'd have 34 patrolmen.
Yes.
How many of them will be in the patrol division?
So
I guess I'm looking for what's the ideal scenario, because if you reduce them by 2, would they come out of the patrol division and reduce your actual daily or regular patrol?
yes, yeah, so essentially it puts us back to where we were in 2020, 2019. So the plan for the 49th and 50th was another a rotational detective spot. We've always had a fear that, so one of the kind of unique things about the police department is our detectives are incredibly well trained, and they seem to do very well on the promotional exams. So we've had some turnover in our criminal bureau, but usually it's spread out over a few years. But recently we've had a couple of higher level retirements where our detective bureau has been stripped. And we're finding that, you know, we're getting people that have good experience, but they don't have like the fingerprinting experience or crime scene photography or evidence, some specific evidence collection stuff that we're having to train them on. So one of the things that we're going to try and do is have an additional detective spot that rotated every year or two, so that way you could get a good pool of candidates to be able to fill in the event that we did have an opening. So that's one of the initiatives that we've been trying for the past several years. We haven't been able to get there. So you're really, when it comes to if the cuts go through, there may be a trickle down effect where we may not be able to schedule what we normally would schedule if we were fully staffed. But yeah, it's going to come from those areas, because we're pretty much where we're staffed right now is where we have to be staffed. So when the extra bodies come in, they do go to patrol, so that way we have an extra patrol presence and maybe don't incur so much overtime. So yeah, it will come out of
So what
patrol.
would that number be? Out of the 34, how many of them would you target for that? I know you had the answer to one question, you said you'd have 21, and then you would add the 4 new guys, the new recruits. That'd give you 25. Is that the ideal number for that, or is there?
To be honest, John, I would have to take a look, but so to add any like full-time car to any shift, it's essentially 1.5 bodies, right? So if we wanted to, right, because there is no half, right? But we have been creative with that stuff in the past to kind of fill in those gaps, because they work a 4 and 2, so it's a 6-day rotation.
Yeah.
So in
Well, my
order
opinion
to,
is it takes 2.
it takes 2. I'll take them. I'll take them. You know, I'll take
No,
them.
really, it's
So-
1.5 accounts for the 2, 4 on, 2 off.
Yeah.
Then you got the train and everything else.
Yeah, so if we are fully staffed in budget, like for what we're budgeted, we will run, we will be able to schedule 6 cruisers on a 3 to 11, which would be the 1 additional, 5 on our days and 4 on our overnights. So we would be pretty thoroughly staffed. And then traffic and some of our other issues, so. Our patrol, sorry, I didn't mean to say this. So our detectives, we're solid. Well, I don't plan on putting, like, if we reduce our personnel, our detectives are our detectives. We're not we weren't planning on adding anything. It's our patrol division is always going to be the priority to make sure that they are properly staffed. And you see the cruisers and the men and women in uniform on the road, because our priority is to make our community feel safe. And we figure out everything else as we go if we get too short. People can work, it's fine.
I just have one just residual comment, because you had mentioned falling behind in pay scales. Do you guys on a regular basis compare the market baskets? And
Yeah, we do. So our union presidents work with all the other communities. And one of the things that I found since I've been chief is that a lot of the other communities will reach out for their contracts. So there is a lot of communication either between chiefs or between different unions. to benchmark on their own. I think that absolutely not only is best practice for the community, but it also is for the unions to really understand where they're at, whether or not they can go in and ask for an additional benefit or not. And it really kind of allows them to be a little bit more realistic with their expectations when they go to the party.
I can say Dan and I have sat together many, many hours on our last two superior officer contracts, and we've gone line by line through every contract, 20 communities.
Oh.
It's a lot of fun.
I like looking at cars more.
I'm gonna give Harry some coffee over there.
One last, anybody else, last call? Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for keeping our community safe.
Thank you, sir.
Public safety communications up next.
I'm not gonna have a big preamble or anything. I'll tell you a little bit about our department historically, and obviously we started out as two separate departments, the police communications department and the fire communications department. 7 at the police, 4 at the fire. 2015, town decided they were gonna merge us into our own department. Me as essentially the department head, I answer to both police and the fire chief equally, so that we can have operational continuity and make sure that we're doing exactly what they need. We currently are budgeted for 12 full-time telecommunicators plus myself. We don't have any part-time telecommunicators, or true part-time. We do have 4 current per diems that pick up shifts when they're available. When I'm at full staff, there isn't a lot of need for that. And we're fortunate for the first time in probably about 6 years to be at that position, which is a major part of why our overtime budget is able to be what it is, and we were able to do what we did with this current budget in order to supplement that 12th position, and able to reduce the overtime budget. Those bodies reduce the stress in my department by allowing me to have telecommunicators get the time off that they deserve, that they're benefited for, without having to get denied and reschedule and everything else. That's where we're at.
Thanks. Questions? I'm gonna go first this time. So a couple of the questions that we had for you was to give us the 911, number of 911 calls for the year. And then also a call volume comparison with other communities. And I'm trying to make the numbers match, and I don't know what I'm looking at. You and I sat down and you tried to explain it to me, and there's so many different types of calls that I could not keep them straight. So if you could, and if you, do you have that in front of you?
So I may.
Okay. There was one with the 911 calls for the year. I'm gonna skip the non-emergency line calls. And then I guess there were 911 calls for each shift, but then I asked a question about call volume comparison between towns. So you've got Westford listed a little over, almost 30,000 calls.
Correct. So, yeah, so is that the question with the call comparison?
I think more so the call comparison, because clearly it's not just the 911 calls, because that number didn't match up, so.
No, so the 911 calls are a specific type of call that comes in. They could be anything.
Right, but you're
standard, they are more high priority, hot type calls. And those are those numbers. We do have a high 911 call volume as compared to some other communities of similar size as well. I didn't actually get that comparison. I got the overall, which would include those 911.
Okay.
And to the best that I could, and there's a lot of idiosyncrasies between towns, which I'm sure anybody else calling would even struggle more than I do with it. But when we're trying to break down exactly what is considered calls in some towns versus what's in a call in Westford, it's hard to get the exact thing, but this is pretty accurate. Some communities include absolutely everything that comes in that they have to respond to. Where we or patrol initiated where we try to break out, we break out of that number, and even the number that the police uses, their number is reduced from what the actual call line is, because a lot of the patrol initiated stuff does not get included in our overall number count, which is historical, goes way back. We used to include it, but we pulled it out, so. As you can see, that Westford is at about 30,000. Calls we receive, that's 911 and calls. This is calls that we are dispatching out, police, fire, that are actually called calls. They require probably reports, officers or fire to go to, or both. Chelmsford was at 36, Acton's at 27, Andover was at 32, and Littleton was at 21, that calls spot.
I mean, we seem to be somewhat in line if you look at each of those communities. Some are a little bit larger than ours, so you would, they track based on population, I guess. But there was another piece of data in here saying that we get, over 50,000 business line calls.
Yep, so we get over.
How does
over
that,
50,000.
how does
That's a lot
that
of phone
compare?
calls. It is comparable to other communities.
It
I
is?
think we're high. I think that we are percentage wise high. It's, as we've talked about in our meetings,
Yeah.
that we have, the town of Westford is what the town of Westford is, because we have, through the town management, everything else, have provided services that have been asked for and honestly needed it. Some towns don't do that. Overall, most of those calls, those 50,000, those could be anything from legitimate hot call, because some people do call on the business lines for that. They could be somebody asking, if the roads have been plowed, or if they're gonna be plowed, or if the cables are coming back on today. And we do get some ridiculous type calls. Our rule in communications has always been to never say we can't help you, or we find a way, which obviously drives that call volume too,
Yeah.
because they're gonna get an answer. Sometimes it's, you go to the town website and that's all there, but generally, it's something we have to service.
I think part of my question on the business line calls, I had asked, would it help your workload if, let's say, outside of business hours, or before 7 AM and after maybe 6 PM, or, pick some times? If you didn't answer those business line calls and had, some kind of a statement on, you've called other places saying, you call your doctor's office and they say, if this is a true emergency, call 911, or, call us back tomorrow. Would that help at all?
It would probably to a small degree. Obviously, a lot of them are going to, when we tell them to call back on 911, that's what they're gonna do. I had a good conversation with Chelmsford about their automated call service and stuff.
So Chelmsford has an automated?
They do. We just, the town of Westford decided years ago that, because we had one in place, and they didn't, overall, the town didn't like, the town's people didn't like it. And I think, I know we as an agency, when we call a town like Chelmsford, we don't like it, because you're trying to get there in a hurry, and you hit 0 and you go right through anyways, and that's what most people figure out and do.
Gotcha, okay.
I don't think that would make a major
Right.
difference to us. And we could lose calls in that process and we have, and there was an example where somebody did call in on the business line looking for a well-being check. And that call sat on somebody's voicemail until through the weekend. The results were not favorable when they did find the call. So I get why the town and the chiefs, weren't, but before that, they decided we're not gonna play that game. We're gonna service those calls.
Okay. Can I ask Chief Chambers if he still agrees?
You sure can. I do agree. I think one of the hallmarks of the service of all public safety in Westford is kind of that personal service, so.
Okay. Good enough. All right, Heather.
Just on your tangent, the 911 calls, I know at one point there was a difference in cell phone versus landline. This is all inclusive?
That's all included. This landline, yes, it's all.
Okay, but that's not my
The
question.
different types of cell phones.
My question is more, in the override budget, the 45,000 of overtime, I'm not, just based on your trends, and you answered how much your overtime was for other years, is that light?
the overtime budget is light, but I think that we've done a lot of work with it, and I think I've proven through how we manage our schedule, even when staff is low. We manage to, we do have help of a grant, but other than that, I mean, we still manage it very well, and it's kudos to the staff, because they put in a lot of effort to make it work and cooperate with me in my moving things around in the schedule.
Because
just to
it
make
was
fit.
double for FY '23.
Yeah, it was, so.
What you're budgeting.
It was double. We had a major reduction in staff because we were short-staffed, I think by 4, 5 at some point during the year. Yeah, so this is why Westford has the budget that we do. When we sat down back in 2013, 14, trying to figure out this whole merger thing, one of the things that we decided to do was maintain staffing levels because of the reduced overtime. And one of the unique things I did find out, making those calls that I was asked to do, is I asked, and I couldn't get straight answers out of a lot of the towns, but almost every single town I called, regardless of the size, their overtime budget for their comm center was 6 digits. Most of them were closer to 200,000 for overtime alone. What the budget is, or they had to get funding for.
I was just, I just want to make sure it's efficient more than anything.
I think that is probably the best word you can use for the way that the budget is going right now with the overtime revenue. It's extremely efficient, and again, it's due to.
Sufficient is what it's.
Sufficient. It's
It is
sufficient,
sufficient
it is
for
sufficient,
your
but it's
needs.
because of the efficiencies.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. If I lose a lot of staff, we'll be back at the table asking for help.
Right.
I just wanted to chime in on the idea of measuring the calls and the call volumes, because I think one of the significant things, and I don't think you have the capability of doing this, but the calls come in, and then what happens is you route them out either the fire department or the police department, right? But you have no knowledge of whether or not the call was transferred into was a superficial, just go to the door and check, or whether it opened into a full investigation. You can't determine that, can you?
Through the roundabout, we can.
I mean, not automated.
No.
No, because that's an important part of measuring this call volume stuff, is because it only gets you halfway there. So,
Correct.
right?
That's why we try to make it very clear.
Yeah, and you have to go back with a pencil and paper and try to count them all up.
I do.
Yeah, but God bless you. Thank you very much. Because that's painstaking work. But I just think it's important to keep in mind that when you're judging these calls, you have to remember that the call is just a raw contact, and it doesn't necessarily transfer into a service demand, which is the more important thing as far as budgeting and placing and determining what you're gonna do. So I just want to raise that. The last question I have for you is simply this. I'm hearing more and more from certain communities that there's a growing trend towards regionalizing communication. Can you speak to that or what you know about it?
Yep, there has been for a number of years. Years back, we attended Lowell was looking at doing a regionalized center. We were very much a big part of that. It did not work out, it fell through, everybody pulled out, and the reason generally was that your budget doesn't really reduce, because you're still gonna be responsible as a community to pay a certain fee, which is very similar to what your budgets were anyway. That's what we found that, whether it's changed or not, I don't know. I know that we have constantly looked at that. We built out our room in our current center to potentially house a regional center for one other community, if somebody wanted to do that. We have looked in the past into it. We haven't found any takers, and it's, I know that has come up again. And certainly it's something to look at. Ideally, and again, I go back to, this is Westford, and if Westford was gonna be in a part of a rec and have it be successful, that rec should be here.
The last comment I'll make, and while the chief's still here too, is we used to forward to the public safety, the fire chief and police chief, a little bit of a schematic describing what the workload was. Just a tip, I think if something like that or something close to it, particularly that engaged Part 1 crimes and things like that were included in the town report at the end of the year, I think those would be very important to help the community understand what the actual load is in the town. So just a tip.
Yep. Appreciate it.
Anybody else? Sorry.
So how does the recruiting and keeping them up to date with any of the skills they need to do the job?
for new hires and stuff. So there is a massive shortage of, just like there is in law enforcement and public safety in general, but that is more on the newer side. Telecommunicators, public safety communicators, that has been ongoing for years and years. I can't tell you how long I've been going to classes on how to fix it, and nothing works. There's just not a lot of people who do it. And I was talking to, actually Chelmsford the other day, we welcomed anybody's phone calls. They had their chief meeting with their town, and he said, it is one of the hardest jobs to get somebody to do. It's one of the busiest jobs that you're in. And you're in a small enclosed, basically a capsule. The windows don't even open, and you're stuck in there for your 8 hours or 16-hour shift. You're expected to go home and potentially come back 8 hours later. You have to deal with knowing everybody's policies and procedures to make sure you're doing it right. There's a lot of moving parts, and and what is, I think, a critical part of what it says that is a least understood part of public safety going. So,
I would agree with that.
What, so, sorry, so your training budget seems to be very, very low because, I don't know, do they go to classes, do they need to?
They do, so they don't have to do the amount of training that police and fire certainly do, but there is significant training at the beginning upon hiring. You need to be certified. There is a 911 certification, that's a few days out of the department. There's emergency medical dispatch, which is a state mandate that all telecommunicators do. That's a 3-day training with 2-year recertifications. 911, EMD, and then.
They were looking for the recertification, so continuing.
Yeah, so we have about roughly about 40 hours. Actually, 2 weeks of certification training that they have to go through to get the job. They have to pass those in order to be able to do it. They have to be certified through the state. Once that happens, there is training that they have to do every year to keep that up. It's fairly minimal, 16 hours. Part of the reason, again, why the budget is what it is, we do have grant money that we get for that as well. Get grant money for the offsets the general personnel and training.
Now it makes sense, thank you.
And they're included, your employees with the health and welfare,
Yes, they would have.
yeah, okay,
Chiefs were very good at getting us.
and it's just all in your budget.
Yes.
Any other questions? Let's see from, no? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Emergency management.
Oh, yeah.
Don't worry about it. I know. Who's the emergency manager this year?
Emergency management, I'm not even sure we have any questions.
That's fine, it's not much going on there, but.
Thank God.
Exactly.
All right.
Come on, we just did a drill.
Yeah, let's move on to
Just had a pandemic.
fire department.
That too.
Yeah.
Fire department and ambulance enterprise.
I guess,
Get back up, huh?
yeah, backup, maybe you don't mind, Mike James, deputy fire chief, and Barbara One Bowles, and he's one of our primary firefighters. If you have any questions, you can ask, I take over the questions. The changes, I mean, obviously for the override, we talked about this a lot, that we have several retirements coming up. We would, if we didn't get the override, we'd reduce our staff by 2, we just wouldn't fill them. We have 3 to 4 that are gonna retire, hopefully in the next 12 months. So that we don't want to have to lay anyone off if that happens. We do have slight reduction in fuel. All personal services are contractual. Education may went up a little bit because of people gaining degrees and classes that they're taking. Should say that it's just step raises only, there are no COLA increases because they're gonna be negotiating, their contract expires June 30th. Gasoline, fuel, we took a little cut in that. I think some of the utilities moved down a slight amount. The biggest thing is the personal services, but too, we took some money out of filing purchase services, reduced that amount. There's not a lot of places, other places for us to cut out, we're still not budget.
Questions?
Okay, hi, Chief. Hey, how are you? You gave us a pretty extensive response on your question, so thank you very much for that. I asked you for some breakdowns on activities with regards to, structure fires and things like that, and you provided a lot of stuff, so I'm very grateful. I have to ask you, on that list of, when you actually broke down the structure fires and the incident fires, there were 2,177 rescue emergency responses. I'm assuming that's the ambulance?
Ambulance, yeah.
Okay, ambulance. And there was another category that said,
Car crashes and stuff like that.
okay.
So, yeah.
Cat crashes, all right. And then there was another one that said 633 other responses. What would those be?
That's public assists and stuff like that.
Public assists. And what nature would they be? Like,
They could be someone fall, just need help,
Someone fall.
lift assist, they're not injured, we don't send an ambulance to those. House lockouts,
you guys do the house lockouts?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
We still pump cellars.
pump basements. Much like the police and communications, they call us for everything, and we tend to, that's what Westford expects, and we help them out.
Okay, so I challenged the police chief a little bit. I gotta do the same thing you a little bit, all right, just to be fair.
Yeah.
So, it said that, you reported, the town reports 13 residential fires, 15 structure fires, for a total of basically 50, which is total of 28 fires of some type, and 54 incidents, which include hazmat and all that type of stuff. So, you have a staffing of, 4 captains and 4 lieutenants on a rotating shift.
Right.
The question I have, I think we may have chatted about this before, but and correct me if I'm wrong, but a captain at the scene, in most situations that don't involve structure fires or those 54 incidents, a lieutenant, as far as supervision is concerned, should be fairly sufficient to manage that type of situation, unless it gets very complex.
It does, we go by span of control also.
Yeah.
With 4 to 7 people to supervise. When you're looking at something, we have a lot of back-to-back calls, so you gotta understand that too. But once you get in, anything like, especially these larger buildings, when you go to like Westford or some of these other buildings that propose it, lieutenant's probably on the inside, he's the interior.
Yeah, well, I can understand that. If you're in a structure fire,
And then, not even a structure pipe, just for fire alarms broken, water pipes broken, sprinkler pipes, he's in there assessing with his crew. The captain's outside, he's running the incident, he's in the incident command.
because what I was gonna suggest is why could you not, and I'm not talking about laying anybody off, but I'm talking about eventually attrition wise, cut your captains in half, have the captain work on an admin shift Monday through Friday, and on one on days, one on evenings, right? So that when you get the bulk of your calls, and then on all other cases, the captain, one of the 2 captains would be on call. That would save about $200,000 a year.
It would, we still need the bodies.
Oh, I understand, right.
You know what I mean? So it's really not saving the 200,000 because you're still having someone there that's, getting paid $95,000, for salary, opposed to a captain, probably around 78,000 right now, opposed to a captain that might be 20,000 higher. So you're talking about saving $40,000 by getting rid of 2 captains maybe. And it's a huge safety issue. I think the union and it'd be contractual that we'd have to do that.
Yeah, okay, I just wanted to run that by you because, as we're under the circumstances we're under right now, we have to try to figure
Oh,
out
I understand.
efficiencies everywhere. I noticed also that, you reported in your, on the Narcan that you had administered 3 times, but you also indicated that 13 people died of overdoses last year. And previous to that time, the average was the number was about 5 or 6.
The 13 was the total number of overdoses, reported overdose of poisoning.
They were not fatal
They were
necessarily?
not fatal.
Okay.
We can't determine that.
No,
yeah.
we don't know whether they're fatal or not unless we get a follow-up from the hospital.
Yeah, no, we had that long conversation about that, so I understand that.
So it was 13 reported overdoses and poisonings, 3 times Narcan was
Okay.
administered.
Okay, I got some questions on the ambulance, but I'll let somebody else take it.
Tom's gotta say that too.
Tom?
Thank you. I just want to go to the no override budget and the reductions that were there. One of them is obviously not a very good option of closing the Rogers Station periodically. In part because of the reason that it was opened. I was employee of the town at that time. And the additional 6 to 8 minute response time over there would obviously be potentially catastrophic. The other one that I recognized was the reduction in fuel. And my question for that one is, so you have your needs-based, which is one number, and the reduction for the Prop 2.5, which is the other number. Which number is your true need? Because the option of underfunding fuel and then coming back to have a reserve fund transfer is not going to be necessarily as easy as I believe that the reserve fund is actually being cut this year. So I just want to make sure that that is being funded appropriately.
It's something that we discussed with Dan extensively about, trying to, when we're looking at cuts, and unfortunately, that was the only place that we could see that we could, reduce to have a little bit of savings. And it kind of goes hand in hand with the closing of Rogers. I can give you a little history of that, what our decision was with this. In 2018, we did the staffing study with Scott and Tom, and we were at 9 and we dropped to 8. And that had all the stations open. And anytime that we had a call in the area down with the headquarters or the previous station, one of the substations, the engine was in movement. It always had to come up to cover because there wasn't enough staff at that station. That was the highest call volume. That was from the second ambulance. So we always had someone on the move coming up. Incredible wear and tear on the vehicles, incredible fuel cost. Engine 4 dual motor on by Abbott School coming up to cover one day back around 2018, 2019. So the second ambulance we've been running, the way we run down there now is we have engine 1 staff, we have the first ambulance staff, and the second ambulance is cross-staffed with the tower crew. So we can get when we have a call, if they go out engine 1 and the medic one goes on, we still have 2 people in the station. We don't have to run anyone up from the other substations. So if you're talking 12 to 18 calls, 20 calls, at least a day, you're running one of those trucks. If you reduce the staff, you'd be running them up. So one of those stations would be empty all the time, most of the day anyway. Or they'd be on the road, they'd be traveling back and forth, and then you'd have the additional fuel cost. So Rogers was close enough to this station and to Station 4 to pick up the load if we had to make those cuts. And, with cuts in overtime, it could be possible. Right now, over the year, we've had, so far, we've had about 11 people that have been out, either FMLA, 1 or 2 injured on duty, on medicals. Coming into the springtime, we'll be rolling overtime this year. We'll have to see what happens. Right now, we're okay, we're ahead because some people were taking short-term disability, so we have their wages money that we had in there to help with the overtime cost. But it's just what we learned from where we were in 2018 to now is part of the reason why we chose to close. We were talking to our command staff, that was the way to make it, our EMS coordinators to do that, because they'd always be on the road, or they'd be, as soon as they go out down here, they're calling engine 3 to cover or engine 4 to cover from now. So that's why we chose to close it. And we're hoping to save the fuel costs. Right now, I think that's why our fuel costs are down over the years. And our maintenance, believe it or not, is down a little bit. Things are more expensive to repair. Right now, we had a brake job done on one of the engines. It was $10,000. I was out of my mind. It was, it's the parts, it's not the labor, it's the materials to do it, the steel and trying to get the parts. And there's just a huge price increase out there.
Is that time?
Go ahead,
Let me go to Ari.
Oh, mine is simple one. I'm more curious than anything else. How many miles does each fire truck put on a year?
There's, the mechanic could determine afterwards maintenance records.
It's more of engine hours, that's what he goes by, than miles, but,
I mean,
Engine hours is good enough.
yeah. So you have to find out.
they move a lot.
Oh,
They
really?
do, yeah, they move a lot. So the ambulances.
I mean, it's not just emergency calls, we're in the schools, we're doing inspections, they're doing trainings, I mean, the trucks do move a lot.
Okay, so, just gonna talk to you about the ambulance enterprise, okay, which is always a complex subject, okay? So, ambulance enterprise was budgeted, for 1.6 million this year, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, I think it's the same in both the override and the no override, right? So I looked at the revenue for FY '23 that was brought in by it, and it was 1.09 million, which was a deficit of about 66,000, yeah, $667,000. So it's running at a loss.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Now, I asked you about the overtime. I remember that when we had a previous conversation, I was under the impression that, whenever you had the ambulance activated, if you had to detach one of the firefighters to the ambulance, then you had to call somebody in for overtime.
We don't,
So you said you didn't do it. I saw that.
before we did.
Okay,
Because when we ran 3 or something like that years ago, when we were at that staffing level, that's one of the things we eliminated with our staffing.
all right, well, that's good, because it got me up to date now, so, but there's still $80,000 or in the overtime budget for the ambulance. What does that cover?
The people that are assigned to the ambulance, that's specifically for them, like when they take vacation time, they're out sick. They would, training day, and we have to backfill, training, but, that's just to maintain the staff on that.
Okay, so you have a permanent group with the ambulance all the time?
It's usually the junior guys, Bill.
So within the ambulance budget, there's 9 paramedics that are being paid, so.
To service the ambulance?
To service the ambulance, so the overtime, that overtime money is to fill those shifts when they become vacant.
Okay, and now,
You could make that subsidy, go away by reducing the amount that you fund. They chose 9 when they started ambulance enterprise.
okay,
9 people.
so that's something to look at, I mean. So the other one was, you responded that there were some of the order of 2,287 ambulance calls, which is about 75% of the service that's provided. So and a truck goes out on each one of those calls.
Yes.
Right? So essentially, each time a truck goes, I think it's what, $1,000? It's about maybe $1,200 cost?
We did a simple formula to try to figure that out. I talked to Dan about the best way to do that, and we just divided the budget by the number of calls.
Because that comes to about $2 million a year in cost, which is expensive proposition. The question I have for you is there any way that, for example, you went through a very good explanation of how you respond. So firstly, the cruiser goes down, then the apparatus shows up, and then the ambulance shows up. And the question I was wondering is, and then what happens is, as you get everybody there, you pair off based on what the situation is, or we don't need this, so we can go. Is it possible, or is it any way to, like, for example, when you're doing extractions, right? You mentioned extractions. Extractions give you a little, it's not an emergency, it gives you a little time to prepare and everything else. Can you change or modify the response so that your either the police or your apparatus or the ambulance gets there first, and then they determine whether or not they need additional assistance?
That's not the way to run.
Yeah, I don't understand what you mean by extraction, if you could just explain.
Well, the chief was talking about the fact that, in some of the calls that you're talking about, I think maybe in the BLS, maybe even the ALS too, you're required to remove people out of the building, and that takes.
Sure, to extricate them from.
Right, and you have to, and that takes a
Sure.
few people,
Mhm.
and I understand that, I understand that. What the point I'm trying to make is that, rather than, responding with that whole full gamut right out the
Sure.
door,
Yeah.
if you have an initial response, and then if that determines that's what you need, you can bring in the additional.
Sure.
That's what I'm talking about.
The system is designed off a national standard of response, which is police who are trained at a first responder level, and then our engines are trained at either the EMT or paramedic level. So our engines at a minimum are staffed by 2 Massachusetts and nationally registered EMTs, which is a higher level of care than what the police can provide. And then our ambulances are staffed by 2 paramedics, which is the highest level street provider there is in the country.
Okay.
So when the engines arrive, they are dispatched based on the district that the 911 request is in. So they can typically get there if it's in, say, the Rogers station, the Station 3 area, they can get there several minutes, 6 or 7 minutes before the ambulance can arrive on scene. So they can begin life-saving measures at the EMT level before we get there. So it affords the residents or the visitors to the town in that area that we respond to a full 5 to 6 minutes sometimes of care.
And the deputy also mentioned that the trucks are used for inspections and things like that. Question I have for you is, yeah, I know you have an inspector, right? Would it be cheaper to get him a vehicle as opposed to sending that truck out every time for
Well,
inspection?
the fire prevention officer does inspections as well. The companies on duty they do quarterly inspections, which is getting out into the commercial buildings, public buildings, make sure that they're up to code and it affords them an opportunity to learn the building as well as educate the people there about fire safety. So it's a multifaceted thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I want to go back to your question. I will get the mileage. I wrote a note.
I accepted your answer, but somehow I went back and said, I didn't get an answer.
Yeah, I will get you the answer. Sorry.
I'm kind of following on Dennis's with the whole 3 vehicles thing going. And I just wonder, is that always the case, or does dispatch, I probably should have asked when he was here, like, can they ever determine when you don't?
When you go to, Chelmsford or Lowell that has private EMS services, the fire and police do it all. It's the same, it's pretty much standard around here, you see it. We have, even when they do the EMD, if there's a nurse at the nursing home, they don't have to do EMD because they have a higher medical authority. But, they can say, it could be something like a colostomy bag might be clogged, something like that, and they get there, it's something a lot worse, and all of a sudden, they need more equipment from the ambulance, and you're deep inside the building, so they need help getting the person out, so there's a lot involved.
But not on these pumping the basements and stuff,
That's
right?
one,
That's
that's one.
Okay. One end,
Yeah. Dennis, you brought it up with Tim Wickham, just, 911, they answer 911 phone, they're not always getting the full picture.
Yeah.
Right.
So when we get there, the picture most times they're not, changes rapidly. But as far as pump outs, single engine responses or ambulance responses, those are typically pump outs or assisted resident with something, whether it's a smoke detectors, going on, fire alarm, stuff like that. Those are single company responses. Dispatch does have a matrix for that kind of stuff.
Now, one last question that I have, if you don't mind, on this.
That's okay.
So I get the system is that, two paramedics respond, 2 EMTs are on the truck. Now, if in fact there's a transport on an ALS situation and you need 2 people in the back, I would assume one of the EMTs goes in the back. Now, what impact does that have on your staffing, in the sense that you have to hire somebody to backfill him?
We've gone, 3 firefighter transports are fairly common. If you get something that's a real hot call in the back, we've done 4 occasionally. As long as there's no other call going on, there's no callback. If they have another call going on, it's the captain's call. If he gets
Okay.
overwhelmed, then do it. It's very rare with the staffing we have now that we're not able to handle it. The first choice is, for call back, and then, have at least one engine come over to cover from another town, or we cover all 3 stations.
Now, how does Trinity do it up in Chelmsford when they do that? Do they just go with 2? Or they don't take a
They
Chelmsford firefighter?
No.
They do?
Yeah.
Okay,
All those 2, yeah.
okay.
Is it the standard protocol to collaborate with other teams, other towns, EMS, if we are fully capacity, etc.?
Yes, we have agreements with surrounding towns that if we need an ambulance or an engine, some mutual aid agreements, they do come over here just as well as we provide the same to them.
Jessica?
I still have a couple in mind. I'm wondering if there's like, anything that shows, with the whole MBTA zoning thing going, if there's more calls for some of these high density Like, I don't know if there's like a plot map or any kind of data collected on that.
We've seen an increase with call volume with the apartments, but it's not as much of an increase as that one would imagine.
Okay.
I mean, Westford, I believe last year went down in 56 times. And there's 450 units.
Right.
I mean, that's not a lot. I mean, that's medicals, that's water problems, that's fire alarm activations, stuff like that.
Probably a higher percentage than single family homes,
Yeah.
but, okay.
Yeah, but if you take the number of people, the number of units down there
Yeah.
versus the number of houses in an area, it's relatively the same. Yeah.
I just want to tag on once more. So many frequent visits to Westford, do they have a problem with the construction? Would they have a problem with the quality equipment? Thing is, they might be installing something substandard and passing around.
The medicals are what we call attempted cooking, sets it off, sets the fire alarm off. Someone pulls a pull station, someone burns their dinner and opens up the door, set off the smoke detectors in the hallway. There are some elderly down there that require, they call the ambulance once in a while. I mean, there's quite an array of calls.
Nothing to do with the
There's
quality.
nothing to do with the buildings.
Okay.
No.
Is the fuel assumption the same as for the other budgets? It's $5 for diesel for your calculation? And what is the going rate right now? Like how?
It's down right now. Diesel, you remember?
It's 330, he says less than 330 next set. Our office manager's not here, he's,
It was $5.
yeah, it was up there, yeah. Well, we did the APA. After was.
So there's room a little
There
bit
might be a
there.
little bit of room in our gas and diesel budget, we're thinking.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. And then I was just wondering, like, which we didn't ask with some of the other vehicles, is, how much of the savings do they get? Like, if I think of the gas pump, and it's 330 at the corner, for regular, how much of a discount is it when we fill those?
The wholesale. We got that information at one point and I don't remember what the difference, it was like 60 or 70 cent a gallon discount, I think.
It's about, it equates about $40,000 for the fleet
Okay,
per year.
all right, I was just curious, because
Substantial.
we were talking about COA, and it's
Yeah.
worth it, pushing it enough. And then I had some follow-up on the utility splits, I think between probably ambulance and fire. And I wasn't sure, what was the basis for that?
It was,
Cause if everything goes out at a call, like,
Right.
it's almost like it's a 50-50.
it's fine, but we have two other stations. It really, when we were up here on Main Street, we did, before I was chief, they did analysis and figured out with the floor space, what the ambulances take up for heat and electricity. And I think it was based, I might be wrong, but I think it was based on square footage. And they kind of broke it down, what the percentage was, and then the other two buildings. But, I mean, it's just, we're all paying this, coming out of the same
Right.
place kind of, but it's,
So if you're consistent year to year, you can actually compare it, so we try and just keep that at 7.
it's that change of percentage.
Well, it kind of leads into my next, the ambulance the enterprise, it just seems like the subsidy's growing and growing, and I wonder why.
I can stop, when we
Reimbursement rates.
go enterprise, for years we didn't charge. It was by funds of the ambulance fund and provide the ambulance and we didn't charge. When they went enterprise, we hope, whatever we made to offset the cost of our firefighting people that we needed anyway. So whatever we got helped and, the decision to pick 9, that was before me, Dan can.
Yeah, so part of the strategy we've been using since we had the ambulance enterprise was that we wanted to build up the retained earnings every couple of years to be able to purchase equipment and an ambulance. Well, the cost of ambulances has skyrocketed. We've got one on the plan right now for $489,000, which we're actually looking to issue a bond so we can purchase it or order it now and maybe supplement or replace it with retained earnings in October. But, right now, so last year is our best year we ever had. We had $1,090,000 come in revenue. And we had a projection of $850,000, so it's $190,000 that's going to retained earnings. However, we use 50 of that each year to offset the budget too, so we're only building up $140,000 per year. So you know, 3 years at 140,000, that's only 420,000, so it's not even enough to cover a new ambulance. So that's why we're keeping our revenue assumption low, and that's why the subsidy is growing a bit, so we can buy that capital.
So my only comment on that is, I don't know, I'm still trying to think, in this year, when we're having such a crunch, do we want to try to build ambulance retained earnings for an ambulance that we're not gonna purchase for another 3 years, correct? Or, because we've got
Longer
one
than
now,
March, it'll be 2 years, at least by the time we get it.
2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we need the funds in hand to order it, so it's one of those things where, you know, we could play with the amount a little bit, but we have to start building up again too, to purchase the next one, 3
yeah,
or 4 years
I
after.
mean, the ambulance we bought, what, two years ago?
Mhm.
That was 365. And we're already up
40.
How much did you say you're throwing in retained earnings every year?
So last year was the highest year, we had 190,000. So, but you have to back out the 50 that we applied to offset the budget too, so net 140.
And then that's for FY '24, and what's FY '25's plan?
So our revenue is not as high for what we collected yet, it's the same thing, it's 850 in revenue and 50 in retained earnings, but we're only on pace for 1,040,000.
I kind of agree with your point, like, it's a tough time to, and if you think you're gonna bond it anyway, because they're just escalating prices, it's kind of a tough.
yeah.
But we're hoping not to permanently bond that, we're hoping to
Pay cash.
pay cash, take back the bonds, so that pay interest costs, because
And
that's
I
gonna make
appreciate
it more
that, because I
difficult.
don't like the other thing bonded,
I know.
so. And what was the retained earnings balance? I'm sorry.
It was right around 480, I think. I can find that for you.
Just a quick question. Can you comment a little bit on what your experience is with regards to the reimbursement rates for Medicare, Medicaid, and the commercial? Like, how much are you not getting, or what percentage are you getting from them?
So there's a lot of variables with this. One of the big things is the town of Westford has a contract with Blue Cross, which is one of the largest private, commercial insurances. So we have a contract with them, so when we bill them, we're getting the contracted price.
You're getting a contracted price?
Correct. As far as Medicare, Medicaid, that's all depending on the calls. You can see last year we did a higher volume of Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements, but the 2 years prior, last year we did less.
What I'm saying is, do you get the full reimbursement, or are they coming in short? And how much are they coming in short?
Medicare and Medicaid, we are bounded by the federal government to accept what they give us.
What the rates are.
What the rates are. And the rates this year, I believe, went up $27.
$27. And we did tie the Medicare rates, when the select board approved the new ambulance rates, they tied it to Medicare, so as soon as she got the rates, she increased the ambulance rates for the town. But those rates that we charged, the $1,800 for like an ALS call, are only for 21%, what they call a payer mix of those people that have insurance. I should say that Blue Cross Blue Shield, when we signed the contract in 2018 or so, they if we didn't sign the contract, the option was that they would, or they may send people checks for reimbursement, for payment checks. So it was kind of like we had to talk to the town manager at the time, and in the end, we really had no choice but to sign the contract with them. It was kind of.
So, you had mentioned before, though, when you dealt with Medicaid, years ago,
Yeah.
that you were getting like 75 cents on the dollar or at best. Is that still your experience?
It's not.
It's a set rate, so I mean, it's.
Well, you guys have your cost. You know what your cost is.
If the cost, if the Medicare rates for BLS calls like $562, we get paid $562.
So you get one for one?
Yeah.
Yeah,
for
yeah.
them, yeah.
But they only, if the body actually gets into the. So a lot of the work you're doing, you're not, so I can deal with the subsidy, increase that way.
Dan?
Just to answer Heather's question, retained earnings is at 487,000, but we have 50 offsetting the budget and 22,000 capital, so we have 415,000 available.
sorry, probably had a stink bug over here. Can you just say that one more
It's
time?
understandable, yeah. 487 is the current balance, we have 72 being appropriate town meeting, 50 for the operating budget of that, and then the balance is 415.
Anything else for fire or ambulance? Is there somebody with a hand up? Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, so I did recognize the fact that the subsidy is increasing every year. But in reality, this is really a service that honestly, I hope no one ever has to use, but that it's there. It has to be there because we all may need it at any given time. So so I think there's a really fine balance to that. And then there was something else, but if it comes back, I'll let you know. But that I just wanted to make that point that you know, unfortunately, it is what it is, and I think that it's again, Westford has provided really good services, and I think that's going to be something we want to preserve.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'll get you those.
I'll put it on my list. It's very long, but I'll get you the numbers.
I'm curious whether you drive more or I drive more.
Hey, chief, as a frequent flyer, I can say you guys do a great job.
Oh, thank you.
It's good to hear the success stories.
Yes.
Okay, we always like to hear the people come back and say, thank you.
When they have a problem with me, I say it's your fault.
I think one day I showed up at your house.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, we were shorthanded, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't.
You were the third team that day.
It was a mutual ambulance too.
Yeah.
Okay, building department. Hello.
Good evening, I'm Henry Fontaine, the building commissioner. I'm here to try and answer any questions for you.
I don't know that there's much of a difference, but if you can just highlight any differences for us, and then we'll get right into questions.
Yeah, now I'm looking at the difference between, like you said, there's really nothing that stands out or.
Yeah, it's just the inspector coverage, it looks like, between the two,
Yeah.
between the override and non-override budget. Why don't we just go straight into questions? If anyone's got anything for him?
I think this is the right one. I wrote it down. Isn't the insurance 0.1? Is that, am I in the right department? And you need that person to help with the backlog, but then I thought in one of the
That might be
answers, it said they were
assessor.
9 to 12. Is that the assessors?
Might be assessment.
All right, forget it, never mind.
Anybody?
And then I only had the questions on, it says that there's a lot of time with doing the online permitting, and I was just curious if it was, you know, if it's worth it to do all the online, if it takes so much effort to go through it, as opposed to having someone show up.
It's a balance right now. So we're, it's eliminating a lot of the footprint into the building. So that's helping out a lot. The admin is putting a lot of time into it, so we have to kind of, myself and the other inspector have to spend a little more time at the counter on the telephone. So it is a balance. We could certainly use another person, but we're trying to, I think we can make it work. And I think at the end of the day, it's gonna be a better deal for us.
I feel bad, you waited all
I
night,
know.
I like to have, give at least a question.
You never hurt my feelings.
No, it's okay.
Maybe next year it'll go reverse order.
I just made a note to myself
Yeah.
to, maybe jump you up so you can get out of here earlier.
This is the intern department though.
You know what, I just found the question, how many hours does the intern work, and is it year round, is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, but then I thought that there, in the verbiage, there was a bunch of stuff about it only being like a 0.1. Yeah, the intern is only 0.1, so I was trying to reconcile that with the answer of 9 to 12 hours, because that's more like a 25% person. And that's where I got confused, and I don't know if that's you or Dan answered that.
It's probably me, but, yeah, it's 0.1. It's changed over the years. I think that just number of hours change, year to year. So with the 11,000, it's more than 0.1, I believe. believe, so,
Okay,
you
so,
know, it's probably a 0.2 or 0.3.
okay, that's what it seemed like based on how much they were in and the impact of that they had on that department. So-
You know, on their hourly rate, we kind of just take a look at, see how many hours we can work a week with them. So with the 2 interns, it just kind of bounces at anywhere from 9 to 12 hours. We can get it, but we try to take advantage of that. Okay, stay within the budget.
I'll update to a 0.2.
Yeah, just because when the verbiage says this person is so important, but it's like a 0.1 head, it's almost kind of like, you don't really need it, it's 0.1, so they can't be giving you that much benefit, but when you say 9 to 12 hours, it's a kind of a different story, see what I mean?
That's one question. So, this is a good question, and I'm interested in it. If this MBTA Community Zoning Act goes through, what impact do you think that's gonna have on your department? Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think building department permit wise, inspection wise, it'll increase, it'll be, I think we'll be able to handle it, but I certainly feel that it'll be a lot more work for us.
Yeah.
Depending upon how quick it comes at us, it could come back, you know, they're talking a lot of units, it may be just a few units each year, then that's good. If it's a lot of units one year, then, you know, we were able to handle Bell pretty well, so I think that went very well for us.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for sticking around.
Thank you.
Sorry for the
Thank you
5
for making it
minutes.
easy for me. I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
That's the trade-off.
There you go. Have a good night.
Thanks. So the last two are sealer of weights and measures and animal control. Do we have any questions?
We have to have utilities at the kennel if it's just being storage, I think we've talked about that for a couple of years.
Yeah, it's just a minimal electric bill each month, I think, and what else is on
Is
there?
it heat or, I mean, it's not a bunch of money, but water and sewer and electricity, I was just curious if like you shut down the building.
Winterize it,
I don't know what it's like, I don't know if
Don't we
it's,
contract that out?
I think we have talked about cutting that
I
out.
think
in the past.
MCON does that for us.
The animal control or no, wait.
No, I'm
so
talking about
yeah, she's
sealers, the
talking
weights
about-
and
Yeah.
Yeah, right, that, was it 2 years ago they did that? They took that on?
yeah,
MCOT?
yeah, and the fee went up.
Right
on
to the
that,
road,
yeah.
right.
So, but the utilities at the animal control, they're only $281 that we spent in FY 23, so it's a really small amount.
Yeah,
Keep it-
no, I know, it's just the budget's 400, so I'm taking every dollar I can
I understand.
against that 8 million, so.
That's 4 out of the 500,000.
I got a longer list, but I'm gonna add my 400 here.
Okay.
We gave them a good
Anything
toss.
else? I think that brings us to the close of the reviews. You guys wanna?
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor, Andrea, you out there?
I think she left.
Andrea, Chris, okay. John? Aye. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Good night, gentlemen.
Yes, you bet. Thank you for your work.
So, I mean, we're pretty close to wrapping up here too. I'm gonna put this under old business. The FinCom book can be a really tight timeline, so I'm just throwing it out there to start thinking about your section now. I don't even, we're gonna get a revised budget potentially on the 13th. Don't know if that's gonna be final or not. The FinCom book is due by March 1st, I think is the date. So we've got like 2 weeks in there and it may not even be final. So I think we should start thinking about what exactly that narrative is gonna be and, maybe get a little bit of a jump on it. Like usually we've got those tables in the beginning of the section. And honestly, that whole talking about what it says in the table always kind of, I just don't find it super helpful to say, this went up by this percent and that went down by that percent when you can see it right in the table. So I don't know what people think about maybe cutting some of that out. And- Yes, and just be a little bit more like, these are what these numbers really mean, you're gonna. whatever the budget ends up being, right? You're either increasing or decreasing, but what does it mean in terms of resident services or that kind of a thing, and let them look at the numbers themselves. But think about it, and it's gonna be a quick turnaround.
Just for clarification, the dates, 2/5 is when we would have our last meeting.
So, we have our last budget hearing next week on the 1st. I scheduled a wrap-up meeting on February 5th.
That's with the debt and all that stuff, is he gonna address that?
The what?
This town debt and the,
On the 1st will be revenue, capital, debt service.
And the school?
General government, schools are coming back, rec enterprise. Yeah, and then the 5th, that wrap-up was more of a discussion for FinCom. Kind of these little recaps that we've been doing at the beginning, based on last week. Just to kind of tighten everything up in kind of a bow of whatever recommendations we may want to pass on to the select board and town manager. And then the other ones, the 15th is for warrant articles. 29th, we may have some other warrant articles.
Depends on, we usually do, it just depends on the timing, some of the articles might not be ready on the 15th.
Yeah.
So it's a very truncated timeline, so.
Yeah.
When is the town manager doing her next budget thing with the select board?
The 13th. So that's not listed in our list here, but.
And that would be the 500,000 they've asked her for? Because ideally, I'd like for us to be able to give her something to incorporate into that might be, that's
why I
wrap-up.
had the 5th. Yeah.
But we won't know what she's pulled out until the 13th.
Well,
yeah.
I'm speaking for Kristen here, but I think she wants to see your input too. So you're meeting on the
So
5th.
she'll maybe use ours for the 500 as opposed to coming up with her
Right.
own.
Different sets of eyes are always good, so it's.
When we had a chairs meeting, that's why we pushed that back to that Monday rather than meet on Thursday like normal, because she wanted a little extra time. So I think she is gonna, listen to our.
oh, we got a pretty good overview of things here since we've been here. I mean, we gotta.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't want it to be limited to 500 necessarily. And so that's where I'm kind of struggling, like, I don't want to give her a list of recommendations, have her pick out 500 and go with it, because then I'm gonna want to give my version that might have a lot more, because I'll say, I'm flat out, please, Christian, right up bet. I'm already over 500 with what I think is a completely reasonable.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I have my own sort of list going. That's why, so for next week, when we do our look back, bring those up. That way at least she'll hear them on the 1st.
Okay.
That's a little bit earlier. I mean, it's still up to the select board, right? They still have to give her the direction, but she can.
Because I
hear
kind
our
of envision if they're gonna have the non-override and then the 7.5 override, which is where I think it's at, like, I almost want to produce 6 number or my 5 number, or whatever it is, and I don't really know how that will.
Yeah,
play in and how
Right.
that would relate to the FinCom book either.
yeah, like I said, it's, yeah.
We have Tom and Ingrid.
Okay, Tom?
Yeah, so a couple things. It would be great if we could have in the FinCom book kind of spelled out what our recommendation is, or justification for recommendation on each budget, I guess. It might help people understand a little bit better, instead of just that, oh, this went up by 2.5%, that type of stuff. And it may be that there's for and against, in certain budgets. That's just one concept. The other thing that I don't know how many people watched the select board meeting on Monday, but they were also talking about different ways of implementing the override. That, that $8 million number that we've been talking about would not necessarily be what is going to hit the tax roll this year. So I think that's the piece that Tom Clay missed in saying that 500,000. It's significantly, has a more significant impact than just $500,000 off of 8 million. But yes, I think that was just a target, and I do believe that from discussions that we've had that there's going to be a balance of efficiencies, and it's not just going to be, oh, 500,000, we don't have to go to 501,000. You know, if there's $600,000 that's identified between Kristen and Dr. Chu, then you know, that's what's going to end up being brought back. I think that's my impression through discussions.
Ingrid?
Yeah, I guess I'm more, building on what Heather just said, what's our goal? Is our goal to recommend a number or just recommend individual potential cuts? Like, what is, the goal of, our charter says that, we make a recommendation to town meeting.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dennis.
I would suggest how we approach this is, you take the position that, you only go to the taxpayers when you're at a point where you really cannot justify, or you cannot make any more efficiencies than you can. In other words, you've demonstrated to the public that you have done a legitimate or a really deep dive into the budget and have tried to make as much efficiency as you can. And because of, and as a result of that, you've come up short. Now you can go and you can present the budget. If, however, you don't identify things that are need of efficiency, and there's some things that we can point to here. I think what happens is they're going to say, well, geez, you're just passing this on to us. You guys got to go do your job. And I think that's something we have to keep in the back of my mind. That's how I would approach this anyway, is have we done our due diligence and really looked hard at what we've offered for programs, and given the trade-offs that we're asking taxpayers to make, which are significant, and can we look them straight in the eye and say, listen, we have no other choice. This is the way it is, or these critical services are going to go. And if we can't do that, then I think we have to say, look, we can't do it, so.
I think the way I'm sort of gathering things as we were going through is there are certain specific line items that after speaking to the department heads, I'm thinking, okay, that sort of sounds like you might be able to do without that particular item. So I'm pulling that off of the override budget. But then there's a little bit more generic recommendations that aren't tied to a specific line that I've kind of got another little list going. So that's how I've been approaching it. And that's why I was sort of asking for people to, either say it here so that I can kind of add, or send me an email or something, so that, because I would like to ideally put something up like, I don't know, if whoever has gone to Capitol and has seen sort of the straw person that gets put up there, something similar to that, right? We start off, I'll try to gather some kind of a draft of, here are some specific line items that we've looked at, and here are just more general recommendations, and we can kind of talk through them and decide what we want to kind of pass along.
We're not being televised anymore.
Okay.
If anything, we adjourn this.
Who's that?
It's still a public meeting, are we still okay?
I'm just checking if we are still at the library.
It's not on.
We're still being streamed, we're still in public, so I think we're okay.
Okay.
It's just not being recorded, that we can.
Okay.
I think it's copyright.
It's at least being recorded on Zoom, so it's at least something.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, that was kind of my thought process.
I'll tell you one thing that's important is we have to get a much better, clearer discussion about those other contracts with the schools. Because I know we're gonna have problems with that. If we can't explain, well, we've got UNA's done, and we got the custodians. But the contingency has, how much of a flux is that gonna be? Right? How much of a license do they want as far as using that money? And I think, the compensation reserve account is something we have to look at.
Yeah, I think that's gonna be a tough one to
That's the
get
crux.
but in a public meeting, that's gonna be. And they haven't negotiated yet, right?
Yeah.
There's okay, so.
I just have one, sorry, I just have one quick point, and that's, when we're looking at the lines that we say, yeah, they can do without, we just have to be aware of the fact that if we reduce a line this year, like some of the training lines, there's certain ones that impact certifications and things like that. That like Board of Health, I believe, put in their notes that they can fund it this year through grants, but that will not be available next year. So that's something that's a jump already in next year that we building in by recommending to reduce that line. So just there's a fine line that we have to walk in these recommendations and what Kristen is going to end up taking and presenting back. So we just have to look at that as well.
There's one of the last thing I think we should at least think about. And that is, and not for this, not a specific budget recommendation for this year, but a strategic policy recommendation where, I mean, what's happening here, as you can see it, is that local government in many regards is being put out of business. I mean, it's just the costs are just crunching in and everything. And I think what our town ought to do is not to give up everything. We want to preserve our identity as a town, but we need to be able to reach out, as you've already seen with, for example, public safety communications. They're looking out to another town. What is it that we can open up for regionalization and begin that process and build a structure so that if the state goes completely out of control, we can at least be able to offset those things. I think that's a critical recommendation for us.
There's several regionalization or sharing of services recommendations in the budget task force. So I've been sort of pulling those forward as well. And Kristen's got her own list that I'm not sure when we're gonna see the budget task force.
Yeah, it's a shared
list that
Google Doc
she's-
that
yeah.
the department heads are working on to populate.
So they are working on it too, just I haven't got it.
At some point, we need to engage maybe another community and start, see if they want to talk about this,
On to Dennis's point though, do you think there's any chance we might see our budget, her budget, and the non-override budget in the document? Because if we have that straw person and we all vote for it and she doesn't support it, I don't want to vote no on her budget necessarily. I want to be able to communicate my middle ground.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't know what to do with that.
No, sometimes it's fish or cut bait.
So,
I mean, it's-
so if she doesn't come up with the number and we have the straw person, we unanimous, we vote.
You take a vote.
No, and FinCom's not supporting it by large numbers, I mean, that could be kind of challenging.
But bringing a third budget could be equally as confusing,
Right.
I don't know.
Yes.
And at this point, the warrant is closed? Or,
The warrant's closed, but not signed, so.
okay,
Yeah, the other thing too,
because
is
we'd have to add if we were to present another budget,
I think
it would have to be an article or.
No,
so we-
No,
So-
ultimately, and I'll be honest, I don't want to sit through this town meeting, this version of the town meeting that I'm about to describe, but regardless of what we vote to support or not as this committee, we may sit through a town meeting that every single department is held. And every single department has an amendment on the floor for the numbers. And that is, I think, ultimately what school committee, select board, and I would hope that this committee we would get into a room and hammer that out before getting to town meeting floor to have consensus. We may not necessarily agree with every dollar and cent, but I think it's whatever is presented, being able to say that, yes, we had these tough discussions. We recognize that maybe there's a little bit more water to squeeze out of this rock. But at the same time, I think Tom Clay said it very well, that we're right up against it this year. And, having having some impact on services this year to give us a year or two to really find the true efficiencies that we need. I think that's going to be the best thing for the town. But again, it's up to town meeting. It's not up to us to pass a budget. It's not up to the select board. It's not up to school committee. We're just putting a recommendation, and nothing says that this committee has to have a recommendation that's unanimous. We may have some dissenting opinions, so that may be a healthy thing.
I think that's, I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So definitely we don't put 3 budgets, right? 2 budgets, either.
Well, I think
What Dennis said though is that we wanna look out for the taxpayers and say, we can't get there, but we can live with this.
What I'm trying to get is, we should reconcile our budget and town manager's budget and meet in the middle, meet somewhere, right?
That's
So
what
as I would say, select board, town manager and FinCom will support one override budget, whichever it might be, and there will be one non-override budget. So that's where I could see it.
Is Kristen coming to our wrap-up meeting? Where we vote on our straw person?
Just remember one thing. Yep, I was just kind of trying to do the numbers. As it's currently proposed, if these numbers pass, a good 30% of this town is gonna have a real problem with this. It's gonna hurt them.
So
Right.
housing is one thing, but Exodus is bad, right?
What's that?
Exodus, like people move.
Well, that's even worse.
Right,
That's
right,
what it
that's
leads
what-
to.
I don't want to go there, right? There's some place where, as a FinCom, what I would say is, we have to make the town machinery work smoothly, the live machine. But it should also not put the taxpayers in a place where they can't afford to live.
Yeah.
And the way I was thinking about this, right? The 2 points. One is, neither one of the parties, not like parties, but the town expenses and the town revenues. None of them should go through extreme amount of pain while the other party is sitting pretty, right? So I think what Tom said, kind of a reverberate is, they already pared down $4.5 million before getting into the override budget. Is that correct? No.
No.
Oh, no? Okay, so then maybe the override, we got to look at it, right? Another thing which I was considering, but I don't have this data is, what is the wage growth for 2023? And what is the COLA, that social security says? Okay, we can take that as a good measure, that whatever the social security says, this is the COLA for the year, then we could say that's the amount of wages that increase for the year.
But you're talking about union negotiations. That's like not, I mean.
You're right. I know, but you can't say that to the taxpayers if you have contracts that are open-ended. All right, for example, if somebody doesn't want to commit to how many percentages they're gonna offer, so that we know, and they won't disclose that, that's a problem for us to make that point. The other part about this is that many of the people out there are looking at the cost of healthcare, the cost of energy, and the cost of inflation as pass downs from failed policies above us. Okay, they're coming our way. So as a result of that, we're being asked to pass it on to the taxpayers from here. That's another aspect that you have to consider. You see what I'm saying?
I get that.
Okay.
We're not gonna solve this tonight, but let's just.
No, we're not.
think
Very
about it.
interesting conundrum.
Yeah.
Can
so
I make
let's-
one more comment?
yeah.
though? I think when we talk about the taxpayers, I think we're focusing too much on, not too much. We focus on the 8 million, But I think we also need to educate the taxpayers to what is coming and what is out there. And I kind of almost said it during open forum so the select board could hear. But, you know, you don't want the taxpayer to say, okay, we're gonna support X million override, and then next year you throw on the library, and then you throw on the fire station, and then you throw on the Blanchard roof. I think somebody needs to talk to the select board, and I'm gonna go to Cameron tomorrow, and I don't know if it happened at the League of Women Voters, but we need a broad, big picture, because the taxpayer may say, well, we can give you 3 million for the override and all those other projects if they're coming. But, you know, if nothing's coming, then maybe it's 4 or 5.
Yeah.
I'm not sure those conversations are happening.
Non-discretionary capital expenses versus discretionary capital expenses.
People need to know what they're getting into, like, thank goodness we didn't build the meeting room next door, because
Yeah,
they'd
we
be
were
paying
gonna-
for that, and now we'd be asking them for this, and it's just, somebody needs to.
We
You're
have
talking about
talked-
like total impact, really.
Yeah.
Right, for the next short,
Yeah.
you know,
And
5
we
years.
have discussed putting that together, I think it was it might have been at a chairs meeting, putting that whole picture together. Kind of, this is your tax bill coming in over time, so.
And I think people wanna see that, they wanna see that the town is actually thinking that way, and it's just not like, oh, this came about, like, they wanna feel like we're really a little more planning.
This might be a question for Dennis and Krishna. When we negotiate, when somebody negotiates with unions, right? Can we negotiate like a step increase, like
That's
in
supposed to.
2025 budget, you take only this much, but with the guarantee that your 25 and 27 will be.
That's what you're
That's
supposed to
what
do.
they did with the
That's
teachers.
sound union negotiating. You wanna come out of that negotiation with a established cost over a period of time. You don't wanna have an open-ended deal where it can go up and down, spike, you know?
And one more thing is, when we go with override, if we go with override, would that constitute another override down the line, or from that override, it's going to be prop to end up going forward? How is the planning going? Basically, what I'm saying is, are we punting down any of the
So
expenses?
I would watch the last select board meeting, because Tom kind of talked about making sure that this lasts us for 3 years, going into 28, with efficiencies.
See, I have a question about why they wanna do it multi-year. I've never, in my time in this town, I have never seen a multi-year budget. You know, where you've had actually, you issue a particular, tax bill with she's talking about basically a fund that you're gonna put this in, right? I've
Yeah,
never seen that.
So
They're not
that's,
necessarily doing that.
All right,
They talk, again, go back and watch that
Okay.
section of the select board meeting, because there's 2 options. And they seem to be leaning more towards the, you know, pass the override for the top amount, but in FY 25, only assess what you need for 25, and then assess the rest in 26. So there may not be a fund that the town is keeping that money
So
for.
once they assess it, you're locked in at that point for the prop to end up, right?
Yes.
So.
No. Sorry, if it's done the way that Christina just said, the way I understand it is, if we got to FY 26 budget, okay, and we've already authorized the override for that budget, we don't have to go through this main discussion and the stress on employees and the services about whether or not an override is going to pass, both town meeting and the ballot. But if we realize more efficiencies or greater revenues come in, then that full amount isn't necessarily going to be assessed. So, you know, just because we authorize, I'm just going to keep using the number 8, you know, even 700, 7,500,000, whatever you want to use, just because we would authorize that this year doesn't mean that full amount would actually be assessed, is the way that I'm understanding it. But the select board is also looking at the possibility of doing just the override for what is needed this year, and then if needed next year, doing another override vote.
That's,
So
okay, but I think we should, because that's not the way I understood it, so let's not talk about how it gets implemented. I
One
will
last
leave
question.
that.
would override impact our AAA bond rating?
Would what impact it?
Would override impact the bond rating?
I don't think so. No, it's not debt, it's not, I don't think
Kind
so.
of shows poor planning, right? So
No, I don't think we look at it that way.
then does the override impact bond rating?
If it fails, okay, sure.
Okay.
I mean, from what I've heard here today, from the beginning to now, from these heads, I mean, there's gonna be some impacts. And some people are gonna be upset, but I mean, I don't see services being crippled. Right?
Not on the town side.
Yeah, well, the schools are always gonna claim that, right? But the town side sounds pretty square away. And, there's gonna be some issues, there's no question about that. But, you know, you've got an issue over, at the other side, and I think the question there is, you know, okay, what did you agree to? I mean, what did you agree to? We need to know. And we don't know the full picture yet.
Let's move on. Do we want to just punt the minutes? Let's just punt the
Yeah,
minutes
sure.
again to next meeting, Dan.
Yeah.
And, let's adjourn. Yeah.
Adjourn.
Adjourn, second.
Third, fourth, fifth.
Okay.
Good roll call.
You want them, you're gonna adjourn him? No
Regarding-
minutes?
regarding-
All right, okay, fine.
Okay.